Synth Network.
Good evening, it's just gone 7 p.m. here in the UK. It's Friday the 30th of July. This is episode 69. That one I didn't have to remember at all for some strange smutty reason. Welcome to the Synth Network live show. We have a very special guest who I'll introduce to you in just a moment. We've also got a kind of a secondary special guest because Ben can't make it. We are hoping he might just ping in at some point from the venue because he's playing live tonight. So we might be able to speak to him at some point. But we've got the regular smorgasbord of news items, but we've got a very special guest who we're going to spend most of the time talking to. This is a man who I am very, very lucky to call a good friend. We've known each other many, many years. Here we are, just outside a very famous recording studio, somewhere in the middle of Chanhassen, near Minneapolis. It is none other than the legend that is Automatic Gainsay stroke Marc Doty. Welcome, one and all. How are we? Are we all good?
Doing well.
Yeah, I'm all right.
We have fake Ben. How could we tell?
Everyone. I forgot to download everything today, though, so I haven't had a chance to listen to any of the things we're going to talk about. So I thought I'd just pop in and say hello. You all right, everyone?
It's funny because Ben seems to have travelled south to the Midlands somewhere, judging by the accent. That's not old classic Warrington.
That's good. Right. Is it Liverpool?
It's kind of Gary Barlow.
Gary
You kind of got to talk
Barlow.
slow like that.
I didn't download it. No, I can't do it. I can't do it. Anyway, it's me.
We never have guessed.
Everybody.
So let's just go around the room and say hi to everyone. Let's go to our guest. First of all, Marc, where do we find you this fine day? How are you? And welcome to the show.
Yes, I'm actually pretty exhausted. My son is visiting, and we're getting a lot of exciting things in while he's here, and I'm worn out because I'm old. So, but other than that, I'm doing really great.
Good.
I have too many synths to demonstrate, which is both good and bad.
Yeah.
And things are good.
Brilliant. Well, thank you ever so much for coming. We've been trying to get you here for ages. You are the proverbial jello that we tried to nail to the wall. We've got you at last. So thank you for coming. Let's move across to Dominic Hawken, who is standing in rather admirably and visually for Ben. How are you, Dom?
I'm very well, thank you very much. I did my best. I got fluff stuck in my mouth. I've been really good. I've been doing a bit of proper work, day job work this week,
right.
Which has been made a change. So a bit of consulting for some people that I used to work with, which has been a nice little break.
Okay.
Especially as it got me out of the house. It's been involved. It's going to be visiting stores and stuff, which has been interesting. And I was just saying before you went live, I got one of these from Japan, of all places, that arrived inside of a week, and this is my new most favourite thing in the world at the moment. So I've just been messing around with that, trying to make kind of lo-fi stuff, which has been really
Excellent.
good fun. So yeah, a good week. How about yourself?
Brilliant. Yes, very good. I actually got out for the first time to a pub in 2 years almost yesterday, and sat in a pub garden with a nice warm English beer, celebrating my birthday. So that was really
Very
nice. So
nice.
that's cool. Yeah, very good.
I'm a bit too low according to the chat, so I'm just going to go and twiddle some knobs while you
Twiddle your
while you
knobs.
have a chat.
Well, we'll talk to Cryss. Cryss, how are you in California?
Yeah, doing well. It's been a pretty busy week, but a lot of cool stuff coming, and I'm a little bit jealous of Dominic for getting some hardware. I've gotten a bunch of software this week, which has been really wonderful, and so just haven't had the time to play all of it yet, but the stuff that I have has been wonderful, so been looking forward to today, of course, and
Good.
Just doing well.
Good, excellent. Well, really delighted to hear that everyone is happy and well, and hopefully staying germ-free. I came out of self-isolation. When was it? Tuesday, I think it was, because I'd spent too much time close to someone who did actually have two people that did actually come down with COVID. But thankfully, because they'd had their jabs, they were only ill for like 2 or 3 days. So I've just, can you notice my little cat in the corner? She's trying to get out. She's now pulling out the carpet, so I'm going to need to go and sort that out in a minute. But yeah, I got pinged, so I had to self-isolate, and thankfully it was like 2 days before my birthday that I was free to go forth and multiply and do all that kind of stuff. Just bear with me. She's going to tear my carpet up if I don't do this.
No worries. If anyone in the chat can hear me, just let us know if this mic is a bit better. Sorry to interrupt there.
Oh yeah, we're just trying to imagine the horror of self-isolating in a room full of synthesizers.
That's terrible.
Here we go. Cats and synths. How stereotypical am I? Right, so yes, there we go. We'll hopefully see Ben coming in at some point, and he'll come and say hi. But we've got a few news things to talk about. Before we do that, let me just do all the housekeeping stuff. So, you are probably all watching us already on YouTube, but if you're not, you can, and this is where you find us. And that moniker is the same, whatever social media platform you want to find us on. So whether it's Facebook, Instagram or Twitter, we are across all of those. Please do subscribe or like or do whatever it is that you do to follow us on those places. If you want to donate to the show, which we'd really love you to do, and some of you are regularly doing, we're very grateful for that. The link is in the description. It's there on the screen as well, so you can click on that. You can send us as much or as little money as you like. It all helps, and it keeps us on air for as long as we can. I think that's pretty much it. Anything else, Chris?
One thing I want to mention, if you have questions for Mark, in the chat, please make sure you put at Synthient Sound or at Synth Network, at Mr. Wiggly. I'll be collecting some of those questions to ask during the show. So
good man. And can I just put it out there right now? Anything to do with paraphonic? Just maybe we'll get a definitive statement later. But
what would I have to talk about if not that?
Oh well, bye. And no, I've actually been dabbling with a paraphonic synthesizer for the first time, a genuine hardware analog paraphonic synthesizer for the first time in my life, and it takes a bit of getting used to, I have to say. We maybe discuss that later. So, if you want to message us, like I say, do so in the comment section. Make sure you @ us, and then we can see those. And if we miss your question, because sometimes we're sort of in the flow and we miss it and we haven't asked it and we haven't mentioned it, do feel free to put it in there again, and hopefully we'll pick it up on the second time. But welcome to everybody that's in the chat room. I'm not going to go through all of your names because you all know who you are, but thank you ever so much for coming along, and I hope you enjoy the next couple of hours as we look at some of the week's news. And we're going to kick off with this one, which I got very excited about, because I'm a big fan of these particular products. This is the news that Korg have updated and added to their Korg Collection, and we're now up to Korg Collection 3. So for your money, you now get an ARP Odyssey, you get 2 Tritons, a standard Triton and a Triton Extreme, you get an MS-20, you get an M1, you get a Wave Station, you get a Poly 6, you get a Monopoly or a Monopoly, however you want to pronounce it, it's entirely fine with me. But the 2 big ones, Triton Extreme is new, but the 2 big new items are the 700S and the Korg Prophecy. At last, we now have a physical modeler in the ranks. And this is now available for, I think it's normally $399, but there are some discounts to be had. And there's also an upgrade path if you have some of these things already. So I managed to download, so I've got some thoughts on this because I own some of the hardware, so I wanted to do some comparisons. But first of all, let's go to our guest, because it's polite to go there first. Obviously, you're a man known for your hardware passion, but you also are a fan of some of the instruments in terms of their hardware form, in that are included in this collection. What are your thoughts on this? Have you had a chance to listen to them? Do you think they're comparable? What are your general thoughts, Mark?
It was really funny when I was watching the video, when it got to the section where they were talking about the Triton, and I'm like hearing various like samples that I recognize. I'm like, oh, I know that one. Oh, I know that one. Because I don't know if people know this, but I have a Korg Triton LE that I use extensively in demonstrating analog synthesizers whenever I'm not an analog drum fan. So I use the Triton to program all my drums.
Sure.
And so I am a huge fan of this idea in the sense that if you can have a Triton, and if you're getting all these synths for that price, that's way cheaper than buying an actual Triton. The prices for them are going up, which I'm irritated with, because why would any of you want them? I want them. You want them. But yeah, this would be a great way, I think, to get a hold of a Triton, which is worth having. The sounds on it are really, really fantastic. And yeah, and also the prop. Hello?
Are we back? Can anybody hear me? Oh, I think we've had a massive... Nope, Dominic's gone. Can anybody hear me?
Now I can hear something.
Oh, excellent. Right, are we back in the room? I think Dominic's gone. I don't know what happened there.
Got a little bit funky.
Yeah. So are we all? I can hear you, Cryss. I can hear you, Mark. You can all hear me, yeah.
Clearer now.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's some interference that's happening, and it's sounding a bit metallic, but I can now see and hear you again.
Okay. I wonder. I don't know where that was. That was very, very odd. Apologies for that. I think we're all back. So where were we? You were talking about the. I don't know where we got when we got cut off there.
Stop buying Tritons because I want them all.
That's it. Yeah.
Oh, wait, hold on. But Manny says poly streaming or para streaming.
Very good. Oh no, wrong thing. Where's the caption? There it is. God, shot up there. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. Whether it was the streaming service, or whether it was me.
No, it was a streaming service, I think, because I thought for a moment it was Mark, and then I ducked out and came back, and you couldn't log in for a bit. So
right.
Yeah.
Oh well. Phew. Well, at least that's over. So we were saying, Mark, about the rising prices of the Tritons and everything. So how about the rest of the package?
Well, I went on for quite a while blathering about this, but I'll go back and say it again.
Yeah,
Rob, you and I share a secret love, but this isn't the place to talk about it. No, okay. A secret love about the Korg Prophecy.
Yes.
Which the story goes, when analog synths started to become popular again, I wanted them, but of course the internet actually really wasn't someplace you could get them. So it was hard to find them in my relatively small town. So I went to my music store and I was like, what do you have that's like an analog synthesizer? And the Korg Prophecy had just come out. Yeah. And so it was my analog synthesizer for a while. But it actually served the purpose relatively well. And I really enjoyed that synthesizer as a synthesizer in general, except for the programming, which so vastly exceeded my understanding or capability at that time that I was like, but yeah.
It's not an easy thing to program, that's for sure.
But the sounds are fantastic.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. What about the analog stuff that's in there? I mean, we know that you have a love of the mono poly and the poly 6. I think you have an affection for as well. What about the 700S? I mean, that's a nice new thing. I love that. That was the first synthesizer I actually got to touch in the early 80s. And I have a very soft spot for that.
I'd have to hear it, and it's been, it's always been my thing, like, the really analog sounding analog synths, I've always been able to comfortably say, well, yeah, you can't do that with digital, or you can't do that with software. But in the past 10 years, there have been such amazing advances that I don't feel comfortable saying that anymore.
Yeah.
I would have to like actually play with the 700S to like really weigh in, but I do trust Korg to do a great job, because Korg does a great job with things.
Yeah.
And I have always wanted one of those because they sound so analog. They have all of the tone and desired instability that an analog synth that sounds like an analog synth does and should.
Yeah.
So I hope that they were able to reproduce that, but I also kind of wonder, I wonder how people who expect a lot of stability who are using software, because software users, if I may characterize them, do rely on a certain level of stability and tuning, lack of variability. So if this sounds truly like a 700S should, it should be a little bit frustrating, I would think, for software users, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, this was the one synthesizer that was the first synthesizer that I physically touched and twiddled knobs with in early 1983 or 84. I can't remember which. The school had one, and funnily enough, they had. So if I just bring up the screen again, so on the wood cheeks, they had two little aluminium handles screwed into the wood cheek, so it was easy to move around, which I thought was like a factory fitted thing until I saw another one that didn't have it, and but it was the first synth that I really got to know and attempted to understand, and it was quite simple to do so, and I've been playing with this the last sort of 24 hours or so, and it does. It's bringing back memories, certainly of the tone. Maybe not so much, the switching of the big, selectors on the front panel there, but it is certainly bringing back an essence of something that I remember from all of those years ago. So I like this, and the fact that you've got this little effects pedal board in there as well, which really brings things to life, is very, very nice. We'll talk about the prophecy in a bit more detail, because that's the one thing that I really was very interested in. But let's go to Dominic as our other guest this week. What are your thoughts on the Korg Collection 3? Have you had a chance to look at it, play with it?
Yeah, very briefly. Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? I was never a Korg fanboy back in the day. So I remember, first of all, I'm really impressed you had a 700S in your school.
I know.
Crikey. You go to like Eton or something?
No, this was no. I've got I'll tell you a funny story about that. But
okay.
Yeah, carry on. Yeah.
So yeah, that's amazing. But when I was playing around with my first synths at the London Rock Shop, it was kind of the Monopoly and the Poly6 had come out as a duo, and the Juno and the SH101 had come out as the duo, and I jumped on the Roland side. And kind of much the same way as I've never really changed my bank since then. I haven't changed my allegiance that much since then to those early synths. And so there's never been a sound I've particularly missed or wanted to emulate from back then. But the 700S is definitely the one I'd like to try out, and does seem to be touching the right nerves. I totally agree about. I want it to sound wonky. I do want it to sound moving. I think the work needs to be done on some of the software emulations to make to emulate those components warming up and drifting and stuff a little bit more, and if it does that, which I haven't really had enough time to kind of test it out, then that would be great. There was a Korg Trident back then.
Yeah,
is that in the group there?
No, it's not.
That doesn't get much press these days, but it was the one that looked great back then.
You can get a version of that with Full Bucket. They make an emulation of it that's quite good.
Right. I mean, it may not be discussed that much because it's not particularly good, but it was in the list of things. Do you know what I mean? It was probably up near the Jupiter 8 territory back then. It was in that kind of lots of knobs and a little bit out of my price bracket, whereas suddenly the Poly6 and the Monopolies and stuff were. But I do remember trying them all out and going, I think this Roland thing either felt nicer. I think it potentially sounded a bit warmer, but above all else, it was a bit more tactile, and I could understand with the sliders on the Juno a little bit more easily how to program it and stuff. And the Monopoly, on paper gave me paraphony. I'm not sure. It gave me more than one note, but it still didn't quite give me what I thought the SH-101 was giving me. Again, probably those sliders, because back then I couldn't really program them, and I felt like it was easier to use, probably. But yeah, that's a completely historical aside. It's just Korg doesn't excite me that much. I think that's the bottom line there.
I always thought that Korg have probably the nicest legacy, to coin the term, of old synthesizers with lots of character and difference amongst the Roland stuff, like the Junos and the Jupiters. They're all kind of, I'll probably get slaughtered for this, but they're all kind of much of a muchness, aren't they? They're not hugely different from each other, certainly in tone maybe, but with Korg you've got things like the MS-20s, and you've got the Landers, and you've got the Deltas and the Tridents, and you've got the Poly-6s and the Monopolies, and there's kind of a lot of variety there, and there's probably plenty left to mine to make the collection maybe larger in time, which will be interesting.
Totally. Wagu's just saying that the Tridents sound terrible. Please don't tell anyone the prices are still low. So let's just keep it that way.
Yeah, quite. Yes, they're bloody awful. Cryss, I know that I think you pulled the trigger on this, didn't you?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this for a long time, so I thought, well, this is a good time to do it. And so my immediate attraction would be like the Modal Poly and the MS-20 and things like that. And I feel like I've come to it from a little bit different angle because, back in the day and all these classics that we're discussing, I was listening to rock music, and so, when it came to classic rock, to me a real synthesizer was like a mini Moog or a Moog modular, stuff like that. And so, when you get into the late 80s, early 90s, the synth sounds that I heard, and especially as I was really getting a guitar, were things that I just abhorred. I didn't like any of that. Fast forward, I get this Korg collection, and it has been my experience. So it's like I didn't have a lot of time to play with this in the last day, but I just kind of scanned through some of this stuff. And when it came to some of the Triton sounds and those kind of 90s and early 2000s sounds, I have to admit I was having a bit of fun in a way I didn't think I would, because I was expecting to really get into the other ones first. But as you play some of those very atmospheric ethereal sounds, it kind of inspires you, like maybe I'll be the next Greek keyboard god.
Yanni, that's the one.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, you play some of those patches and it just takes you all back into the 90s new age music, and so it was kind of fun, and that's not an area of music that I've really experimented with. So I'm thinking maybe I might use some of that Triton stuff to go there and try it out.
Well, I mean, Korg workstations back in the day in the 90s were literally on everything. And it didn't seem to matter which genre. The workstations were big with R&B hip hop guys because they would use one with an MPC, and then they were big, as stage keyboards because they had everything on there in one unit. They were just massive, and I always liked that. With the Wave Station and the M1, because I bought those individually some years ago. And it was like every patch, oh yeah, I know that one, I've heard that one. And you'd always gravitate to a whole bunch of things because it just sounded nice and familiar, made you feel a bit fuzzy. And the Triton, like Mark said, I've long thought about getting a Triton rack. Don't want the keyboard, just give me all of those sounds in the box and then I can dig in. Don't need to bother now, it's all there. It's literally all in that package. The one that interests me and the one that I'm going to talk about is the Prophecy, because I've got one just there and I've had it since the mid-90s, and it is, as I've said many times before, the one synth you would have to prize from my cold dead hands. It's being, whether I'm cremated or buried, it's coming with. It's a wonderful, wonderful instrument, and I remember when it came out, so it was about late 95, early 96, that it was £1,200 for a 37-key monophonic synthesizer, and I'm like, what? I've just bought a Roland sound canvas for £460, and it's however many notes polyphonic that was, 128 I think, and 32-part multi-timbral, and has thousands of sounds. What the hell? And then I actually got to play one, funnily enough, at the launch of the Z1. And it was the first time that I kind of played it and thought, wow, this really sounds something else. For me, I'm not a keyboard player. I can't play keys. But playing the Prophecy made me sound some way competent. And I think that's a combination of monophonic synthesizers that, you can't, it's difficult to kind of hit bum notes, or it's more difficult to hit bum notes in a monophonic synthesizer, but also the expression. And I've always loved the expression. The ribbon controller, the fact that you can control the amount of breath going into an acoustic model with the modulation wheel. That third log wheel in itself with the fingers on the ribbon, you can just do so much with it. And then the aftertouch, I think it was the first keyboard I had that had aftertouch. It was amazing. So when this was announced or came out yesterday, I was like, wow, they've done it. They've actually done it. And I brought it up and had a look. So let's just bring this screen up here. And the first thing that I noticed that made my heart sing was this wonderful layout of the controls and the interface and the workings of this thing. This is something that Prophecy users have never had unless they've bought a really decent computer editor, which there were only like a couple. I remember one called Progenie. I don't know if anybody else remembers Progenie, but it was Windows 95 days, and this wasn't, it just didn't look good. It was just lots of numbers on the screen. This is now much more visual. You've got the routings all shown there. You drop down menus. It's so simple. And I'm just like rediscovering this whole thing all over again. You've got an FX section in there. It's 256 note polyphonic if you want it to be.
Oh, wow.
So I'm now playing chords with prophetic steps, for example. A00, the opening patch. On its own, it's fantastic, but playing chords with this thing is just incredible. It's such an amazing experience to kind of have this all opened up. And then you've got the ARP section, which is a nicely detailed ARP section, and you can import all of your old Prophecy patches into this. They all read. It's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Now I've been doing some A/Bing between that and the hardware, and say for a couple of little things, it's nailed it. It's absolutely nailed it, which it should do because it's a digital version of a digital synthesizer. It absolutely should. And it's not one of those digital synthesizers that has old 12-bit DACs. This was in the 90s, so everything was nice and shiny and clear. And so yeah, I'm really liking this. My only bugbear with the Prophecy is that it doesn't work as an editor for the hardware. Now that would be amazing if I could edit my hardware, and there's no exporting or transmission of patches you've designed in the software to the hardware either, which I think is a little bit of a miss, because that would have been really nice. But I can't really grumble. My biggest bugbear with this, I don't know if anybody else has kind of come across this, is Korg's pricing and upgrade policy, and I want to put this out there. It's $400 for the whole thing. Now, admittedly, it's currently on sale, so you're going to get something off of that. But it's when you compare that to, say, Arturia's V collection, which has near enough 30 plugins, instruments, compared to this, which is like 10 instruments and one effect, it's not equitable. If you've got £400 to spend, what are you going to do? And I think everyone would kind of go for the one with all of the the stuff in it. But also the upgrade path is barely non-existent, and you can upgrade from previous Korg collections for significant discounts. But I bought individual licenses for the M1 and the Wave Station a few years ago. I then bought individual licenses for the Poly 6 and the Mono Poly when they brought them out as Reason Rack extensions. So I've paid 4 full price plugins. None of that qualifies me for not even $10. Nothing. Yeah. It just counts for absolutely nothing. However, when I bought this, the NTS1, I got a free M1 LE license as Korg dish out. That got me a huge discount. So I just don't understand that route, that kind of upgrade route. It seems very unfair.
A lot of people online have been pretty upset about that very issue about it. You know, one of the things that I found, so again, I just totally skipped over. I played with a lot of keyboardists that had workstation style synths, or, you know, anything that was like Triton or Motif, things like that. Even though I've never owned any of that, having had the Roland Cloud and had access to their the 580 or 5080 or whatever, and all their different, you know, I don't remember what the numbers are, 990 and all those kind of things. Haven't played them. Hearing the Korg stuff has been kind of interesting because I think the sounds are a lot better, and it was kind of surprising because when I played the Roland stuff, and if you ask me about like the older analog stuff, like I really do like the Roland, you know, the vintage Roland sound, but when it got to this digital era, I found that their stuff, and I had assumed it was pretty much across the board, like any sort of workstation sound. They pile so many sounds in there all together at one key press. It's not really that fat sounding. It sounds very thin. But I've really enjoyed some of these Korg sounds. I think that they're a more interesting area to mine. And again, I during that era was not into it. So things like the Korg M1, I was having a blast playing through some of the presets on there. I mean, just having a blast. Like, there's some classic sounds in there that are not the, you know, the old sounds that we really love. But
Yeah.
I mean, the old sounds that we've kind of grown up with. But they've got some classics in there.
Yeah, and absolutely. They. So I was just in the middle of doing something else, and you stopped talking, so I can't switch your camera. Say something nice. I'm just trying to look for the link. Here it is. Sorry. There we go. Right. Let's bring everyone back into the room. Yeah. There are some great sounds in there. Some really, really useful sounds as well. But there's a lot of nostalgia, I think, attached to these.
Is it useful? I mean, to me, that's exactly as you say. That's really expensive when you compare the market, the whole thing, and they just seem to be disconnected potentially internally as a company if they're getting the upgrade prices wrong, because there's no excuse for that. I don't think anyone would do that on purpose. So there's some disconnection going on there. And it's brilliant to go through the M1 sounds, but after you've gone through them, you're not really going to use them on much. You know, that's what I mean about the legacy stuff. To me, it's worth about 149, and it would be worth considering. It's definitely not worth that much. And the upgrade path, as you say, even if it's a few quid off, it should be there. That just sounds like a corporate mistake. It
just feels very weird.
It doesn't touch my.
And there was also one thing, I have to point this out, because I feel obliged to, because I'm such a fan of the Prophecy. So somebody pointed out last night in a conversation that the Prophecy only had 5 of the 7 oscillators that the original had. And I thought, well, how can you do that? How can you recreate the Prophecy without 2 of the oscillators? And I looked on the website, and sure enough, it says on there, it comes with 5 of the 7 oscillators. So I'm thinking, so the Prophecy had 7 oscillators. What have they done? And what they've done is they've combined the brass, the reed, and the pluck physical modelling oscillators into one. So you have physical modelling oscillators. So they're all there, but there's this kind of weird. Certainly with the website, the descriptions, it seems to me like somebody who was probably not born when the Prophecy was around, which makes me sound really old, but probably is true. Some young intern has just typed this up and go on Google and kind of just it's just very strange. But
I think you're right. It's a necessary evil. I mean, Korg are on fire at the moment in terms of how brilliant they are. They're probably the most successful synth company in the world right now. Yeah. And there's a department somewhere where they're saying, "Oh, we've got to release these things because Granddad over there wants to check out his M1." Or and it probably is a necessary evil. That's its possible way.
Yeah, that's so little things like that, but don't be put off. This is, certainly as far as the Prophecy is concerned, I can speak for that. The 700, it's exactly how I remember it. And the others, I've been using the Poly 6 and the Mono Poly in Reason for some while. And it was nice when Reason was able to be used within Logic, so I could bring those in. Now I don't have to worry about that even. So, this is increasing my design maybe to save myself a little bit of money and drop Reason altogether. But yeah, it's out now. And if you have some of their stuff, you might be able to get an upgrade path. You might not, but it's certainly very good stuff. So that's Korg's Collection 3 out now, available directly from the Korg shop, which again is another thing. It's a little bit of an antiquated. It's not a great system that they have. They had multiple websites, and I think there's some old legacy stuff that they couldn't get rid of. And so yeah, you just be careful and look for the right path. Look for the right path, Luke. Right.
So what is worse, Roland Cloud management or Korg upgrading websites?
Roland Cloud Manager got me again the other week. I had to uninstall and reinstall the bloody thing because it just kept asking me for my password, and I've been going through a big phase of like changing all my passwords to proper 26 character, lots of things, and I save them all in a secure password manager, but I can't access that directly from the Roland Cloud, so I have to go over here, get there, copy that, paste it in, and it's just bloody annoying. So yeah, Roland Cloud Manager can suck balls. Big fat hairy balls. Right, let's move on to a little bit of hardware. Now, I'm going to rely on you analog guys because this isn't me at all. But this is Erica Synth's desktop matrix mixer, and I was watching Robin Vincent's video on this and thinking, wow, this is a super capable piece of equipment. It's basically, so their blurb reads, as Eurorack users may know, it can be challenging to change a patch radically during a performance. Therefore, diverse performances require large systems, or they end up being extremely experimental. Yeah, but if you could repatch your system with the push of a single button, and so this is what it does really. It's kind of a matrix, and you can just push a button and boom, you're into another kind of patch design, and it has 256 connections with different attenuation levels. It has 254 pattern memory. It's got loads of great things in there, but this is just lost on me completely. So, hands up who wants to talk about this one, because I can't. Anyone?
Go if you want. Yeah,
go ahead, Mark. You're our guest.
Actually, this is similar. I mean, I didn't dig too deeply into it. To a Buchla module.
Okay.
The 210E is basically this premise, and it is a fantastically wonderful premise in Buchla because Buchla has presets as a modular system, but the presets, of course, can't plug the cables in for you, so this module actually manages that sort of a preset structure. So the settings that are stored you can have just one patch and then change settings, and you have a modular that has 100% presets. So when I saw this, I was like, well, this is fantastic for Eurorack, because if you're looking for presets, this is what you'll get. And then I was like, well, kind of. And then I'm like, well, if you're using Eurorack, why would you want presets? Because I mean, isn't that the point? Because can't you just have, and I guess you don't have control over all of the elements if you're using some synthesizer that just has full-on presets or whatever. I don't know, but it just made me think, what are we doing? What were we headed for when this is? But no, I really did think this was really cool, and I could see how people who had a limited set of modules but wanted to have much more changeable setups, this would obviously be fantastic.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that, because now you mentioned that, it's kind of what preset synthesizers do. You can store all of these patch settings and then just press a button and no cables required, no mess. Yes, well, we can't go down that path. Dominic, you are clearly, obviously, behind you there. You've got a lot of that gear. Is this something that appeals to you?
It's a lovely thing, isn't it? I mean, they're exactly right. It's the onward march of the modular synth towards becoming a preset-based standard synthesizer is continuing with the release of very computer-oriented modules that do stuff, and oscillators that actually come with VCAs and gates, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the purists would say, hang on a minute, that's not in the spirit of modular. this thing, it looks amazing. That's a honking great price for something like that, and I'm sure it's worth it. It's a honker of a price, and you know, it's got some stuff inside. It does a really nice job. It's decent size as well. I think when I saw it, he didn't have it running in his modular kit, did he? I don't think. It was sort of sitting on the desk and stuff. But I mean, what it does is it allows you to put in 16 inputs and route them to one or all of 16 outputs, and those inputs could be audio, but mostly they're probably likely to be control signals, so LFOs or envelopes or stuff. And really, instead of patching on your modular hole to hole and all the rest, I'm pointing at a modular that's now off my screen, but it's setting up what you could do is you could go hole on the modular into one of those and then out back into the modular again, and then you can do all of your repatching simply by telling this unit to say, well, route cable number 1 into 3, 6 and 7, and it has a random button, which is really cool because suddenly you're routing stuff all over the place and going, oh, happy accidents, and that's kind of modular-ish. I have a horrible feeling if I did, I'd love one, but I can't justify it, and if I had one, it might end up sitting there after I'd used it, you know, not being unpatched all the time, and then I couldn't be bothered to patch it all up again. You know, if I have a modular system, or maybe a big modular system where I know that there are a bunch of triggers and LFOs that I'm always cross-connecting into almost like my default settings, you know what I mean, then it would be a really, really useful thing. It's a bit of a luxury because you can do everything without it, just with cables, but obviously you can't switch them fast, and I mean, maybe a live oriented thing might help, but the random thing is, you know, enticing as well. But it's maybe I'm just getting old and miserly because everything feels a bit expensive at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's €490 plus, you know, obviously we would have to pay tax and import duty, so that's going to bump it up to what, 700, I guess. I don't know, maybe 600-700. And for a little black box that's just essentially, you know, so I guess how would you use this in a live? You'd have to bring all your gear, set it up, and then patch everything into this.
You'd have to leave it patched in your box somehow. Do you know what I mean? So a lot of live people do have cases, relatively small units that they can take on as hand luggage, try and leave it all patched, and then they're going through motions. And some people like Surgeon would use something like, I mean, he changes his setup all the time, he's a techno guy, would use maybe an octatrack, and he'd have lots of backing tracks and bits and pieces in the octatrack, and then he'd be mixing between the modular and the octatrack, that kind of thing. It's probably over the top for live, to be honest. I mean, but the creative, if randomness can be creative, the creativeness would be in the speed at which you can break stuff down and switch it around. I think when you're working in modular, you probably go down that road of, right, I've got my patch sound, and that's your project for the day, and you've finished, and you don't go, right, I'm going to completely reconfigure everything now and have another go. Whereas this, you can do all of that, you know, and it's a very quick way of addressing stuff. But it's like you say, I mean, that patch thing in the middle of the matrix brute behind me does pretty much what that unit does for modular. Yeah,
maybe that's where the idea came from. Cryss, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think it probably makes more sense in something like the Matrix Brute, and obviously it has a kind of a, maybe it finds its roots probably past the 2500, more towards the VCS3 maybe. But I was thinking kind of the same things, like what is this for? Like what would the use of this be? Because most modular people that I observe, I'm not a modular guy so much. I am more of a, you know, I have a really expensive mono synth back there with a bunch of cables hanging off of it. But like, well, there's got to be. I think for as far as the creativity part of it, it would kind of go against some of the modular mindset, especially kind of the ambient stuff, like where you're just every session is going to be different, so you wouldn't really need that, but that randomization would be kind of a fun thing, maybe not a technical thing, but a fun thing to just get you out of the same headspace all the time. And then for live playing, and again, you know, we had I was thinking about Bob Familiar, who we had on one of the earliest shows, and he has a huge make noise setup and doesn't use any of this stuff. I mean, everything is just patched by hand, and he's doing everything as he goes. So I think it would maybe be more towards people that were making more modular synth performances that were a little more traditionally song based, I guess you would say.
Okay.
So maybe like you need to get those same kind of sounds and those same modulation routings in certain parts of a set of songs to do it. So I don't know, maybe that would be, again, it's not for me. Erica Synths, I think the company is great. We've talked about them a bunch, and I like my Polyvox filter, and but their stuff that's a little above the Eurorack normal level starts getting really expensive fast. And their Syntrax looks very, very cool, but again, it's just way out there for what I would use it for as far as money-wise.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. I do like the irony of kind of, presets within the Eurorack world. I shall take that one and have a chuckle with it later on. That's your clocks, isn't it, Mark?
Yes,
It's a little known fact that you're probably more obsessive about clocks, aren't you, than you are about synthesizers.
Sounded like a DX7.
Oh. He's here all week.
About Christmas a year and a half ago or whatever it was, I found a small grandfather clock at a charity shop or a thrift shop in America, and I just was like, what is this doing here? And I grew up when I was a small child. My mom used to take me to furniture stores, and there would be these grandfather clocks, and I'd just sit in front of them, obsessed with them, and I forgot about it for like my whole life until this thing a year and a half ago, and I found this one, and it was missing parts, and I just bought it because it was $20. So I'm like, yes, I'll just take it. And I got it home, and I was like, I'm going to bring this back to life. And then I was like, yeah, you are. You're going to learn how to fix a clock. That's what you're going to do. But weirdly, as I looked into it, and I don't understand this, I just got it. And the more I looked at it, the more I understood it. And I became obsessed. And then I found out no one knows how to fix clocks. And so there are all of these very, very expensive grandfather clocks that people are just getting rid of because it would cost more to fix it than they want to, $1,000 to fix a clock. And most people just don't want to go to that effort. I mean, it used to be that way with analog synths too. Like, oh, this analog synth doesn't work. It's worthless. I'll sell it for nothing. That's what people are doing with clocks. And so I've been able to sort of make my way up the strata of clock value and just buy clocks. They're $100. I can find any level of grandfather clock up to, like something built in the 18th century for $100 somewhere because someone doesn't know how to fix it. And so my house, there's probably 14 grandfather clocks in it right now. 4 of them are for sale, but still, it's madness. Yeah. And my partner is like, no more clocks. What is wrong with you?
Loads more synthesizers, but no more clocks.
But yeah, they're usually not broken, and so I can get them fixed. I can fix them. I know how to make them work. And it's been very weird. I didn't know that about myself, and I now do more with them than I do with synthesizers, which is...
Wow. So we're going to see another channel, maybe?
I have thought about it, but the problem with that is people like me in synthesis, there are those people in clocks. And so if you make a video and you're like, here's this, and this is like this, some a-hole like me will come in and go, you didn't quite get that term right. That's actually this, and it actually started back then, and this is how it really works, and you need to learn how to,
But Mark, you can piss off 2 communities in one go. I mean, it's
eventually, But now I'd be the victim of that.
Yeah,
so.
goals. That's goals. Well, anyway, there you go. That's a nice little deviation into the world of clocks. Brilliant. I've got a couple of PSAs that I want to throw in there. So you guys probably know about this, but they're not show topics. I just want to put them out there because one is very important. One is, well, actually, no, they're both very important. This is the first one. If you own an Elektron power handle or a device that uses the Elektron power handle, send it back. right now, fill in the form on their website, because it can burn, it can give you an electric shock. It proposes a fire hazard and burn risk to customers. So I don't know how many people have got Elektron power handles. I didn't really know they were a thing, but they are, and they are dangerous, and the company is recalling every single one of them. So please do go to the Elektron support pages, and if you've got one of those, get rid quick.
Wow, what a great project that's turned into. I mean,
isn't it? What was that used?
Widely derided when it came out because they launched it with a fanfare instead of saying, "Hey, guess what? You can buy a battery handle for this." It was like announcing
what's
the
it used
power
on?
Handle. It's the Digitax and stuff like that. I think.
Oh, really?
Basically, you can put batteries in the handle,
Yeah.
screw it on, and it's $50-$60 or something. But they did a big video which was kind of, I think it's something.
That's what
we looked at
I
it,
remember.
and kind of fairly widely said, not really worth the fanfare.
Okay.
Fanfare though, isn't it?
Fanfare, yes. Easier all week. He's doing it again.
I got one of those. Missing the tush.
Oh.
But yeah, so now they've got to bring them all back. What a disaster!
Yeah. I know. Well,
disaster.
please do. I mean, it's dangerous to your health. So please do that. So that was one.
I
go
would
ahead.
just
Chris.
apologize, because I remember when this came out, and I'll just apologize that we didn't cover such an important release on Synth Network.
It was beneath us.
It was a Sonic State thing, I think, and it was on that.
Sonic State can do the fanfare, and we'll do the health warnings. The other PSA that I want to put out there, this is something that I read about and then got an email about the other day. So Brainworx are a company in Germany who make incredibly good plugins. They do SSL, Neve recreations, whole bunches of some really, really useful plugins, and they have some great offers on every now and again, and you can pick up some of their stuff. It's very, very good. But unfortunately, unfortunately, they're based in Germany. They are based in Germany, but unfortunately, Germany has encountered a number of flooding situations, and their entire studio, as you can see here, ended up under however many inches of dirty, brown, horrible water. And so they've literally had to strip everything out, and they've lost some stuff. And obviously they've had to take carpets and flooring up and then air it all out. And I mean, it's not, you can't just take one of those. I think that's a Neve, isn't it? You can't just whip one of those out. So yeah, there's been a lot of sadness around Brainworx, and they've literally been completely wiped out. However, they sell all their plugins through Plugin Alliance, I believe. I don't know if it's an exclusive thing, but certainly that's where they go through, isn't it?
That guy there, Dirk, is the one that's behind Brainworx and Plugin Alliance.
And Plugin Alliance, right, gotcha. So you can buy, or you could, should I say, you could buy up until, I think it was yesterday, one of their Neve plugins for like $29.99. And 100% of that would go towards helping them get back on their feet. That offer, I think, has finished. I don't know if they're doing any other ones, but it was the
SSL channel in, and it might still be going. Let me take a look. They have the Opto Red up there right now.
Right. Okay. So yeah, there's a bunch of stuff that you can buy, but I guess anything that you buy, because they're so closely tied together, will help. But please do, if you're thinking about buying a Brainworx plugin, now's probably the time to do it. The good news is that the Tone Empire Opto Red is currently on offer, and that ends tomorrow. The good news is that they had plans to redo the studio. This really has just advanced those plans. So hopefully we will see them back up and running soon. But yeah, that's the news that Brainworx have been flooded. Could do with a bit of help. So just thought I'd put those out there. Right, let's do one more topic, and then let's get into talking to our guests. Let's very quickly give a look to... we'll do this one. Get it out of the way quickly. Be like taking a plaster off, and then we don't have to worry about it anymore.
Whilst you're getting out, it's the model samples and cycles that handle works with.
Right,
Thanks
gotcha.
to Inky and Rob in the chat for putting me straight on that.
Superb. Right, so I'm hoping that this is the right window. It is. So a few hours before we came on air, as they tend to do, Behringer posted this picture on their Facebook page with I think the term was beginning work now or something along those lines. And I think that we can all agree that this looks like a Jupiter 8. So it looks like the fabled Jupiter 8 clone has been green-lit, and there is some PCB. Well, no, they're not really PCB diagrams. It just looks like where the PCBs
Layout.
go. Yeah, it's just a layout thing, isn't it? But it's they've clearly done it so that we can look at that and think, oh, coloured buttons. We know what that is. Thoughts on a Behringer Jupiter 8? Is this something we need in our lives? Anyone? Mark, do you think we need one of these?
Well, my whole thing, it's really weird. I'm not sure what's going on in regards to the cloning situation, because the clones are really for people like me. Right. Like we've said, old men who are obsessed with the past and whatever, and because of their sad current lives. Anyway, I want, if I'm going to have a Jupiter 8, and maybe I'd be interested in the Jupiter 8, I don't know, I would want it to be as exact as possible. But the problem that keeps happening, I think, with Behringer is that they start with something that's accurate, and then people who are much younger than I am are going, oh, well, you can't put that out unless it has, MIDI and this and this and this and this. And basically they start adding presets and these sorts of things, which actually undo the elements that are appealing to people like me. So then I'm kind of like, you're getting the worst of both worlds, in the sense that I don't get what I want and they get what they want, but they don't have the original desire for the things that make the thing worth cloning. So I just think it's like this sort of committee of people who disagree, and the result is something that I wonder if it will really capture the original thing. And obviously the D was not like that, although they did add some things to it, but they preserved at least enough of what might be considered a mini Moog sort of sound, and that was awesome. But I worry with this and their CS80 duplication that the public might undermine the possibility of it being an effective actual clone, which would be sad. But all of that being said, I'm not really a huge Jupiter 8 fan. So
yeah, that's fair enough. Cryss, you want one of these in your life?
That would be nice. Yeah. I like the Jupiter sound. My concern is that it sounds like the original, and then if they add features to that, and you don't want to use them, don't use them. But then certain conveniences that we have today that we would like in synthesizers, well, I'm going to use those and I'm going to enjoy it. It's going to make life easier for me. So to me, that's where I'd be a little bit different from Mark maybe, but that's where I would kind of, if you're going to clone something again, like I don't want to have the same problems that they had back in the 80s or the 70s, like fix some of the stuff that doesn't affect the sound. Yeah. So I'm not talking about the movement of oscillators or anything, but like if there's some weird function that it had that it just never made sense to anybody and didn't really add to the value of the sounds that it made, then, change it, fix it, make it better. Add an extra LFO so I don't have to use the third oscillator on the mini Moog, and that's something that Behringer did and also Moog did. I thought that was a great modern, I guess you'd say modern convenience. It could have been a feature that would have been originally on it. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think, I'm looking forward to see what it looks like and what it sounds like. But I think we were discussing this before the show, and I think we all kind of agreed that, the Jupiter 8 is a nice thing, but it isn't really like all that and a side of fries. It hasn't got huge amounts of unique features or characteristics that it just seems to be an instrument that people love because of almost just because it is a Jupiter 8, because it was seen, it looks pretty, it was used by big bands, big names. I said before the show, my lust for it started when it was on the cover of Howard Jones' new song, and there it was Howard Jones, and I wanted to, I dressed up like Howard Jones, I wanted his synthesizer, and that's where the lust started.
I may be a little bit different from you guys in that regard, but to me, I do like the characteristics of the 80s Rolands.
Yeah.
I mean, like a lot. I have a Juno, and it's
Yeah,
simple.
Junos
but
are nice.
It's the tone of it that brings me back to it. I didn't buy a Juno. Well, I mean, the Juno was my first synthesizer. Not this one, but the first one I had was my first synthesizer. And I had no connection with anybody. I had no idea who used it. I like this synthesizer. I like the way it sounds. And so, that kind of Roland era to me just it is a character synth for me. The filters are incredible.
Yeah.
The sounds that you can do with them are amazing. But I mean, at the same time, I can see how other people would go, well, it was because of that connection with a certain song or artist that made me want it, not so much the sound itself.
Yeah, the one thing I love about Rolands of that era, those buttons, those coloured square or slightly rectangular buttons. There was just something about those. It was a really classic 80s design that still I think bears, stands up to this day. So Aaron in the chat room says, I need a pic of Rob dressed up like Howard Jones. I think one exists. So like, no word of a lie, Howard used to wear these kind of weird knitted kind of tank top, sleeveless kind of things. My mother, who was a mad keen like knitter and crocheter, she copied one out of a like a Smash Hits magazine, got the colours matched, got the pattern matched, and it was the love of my life for about 3 months until I moved on to the Thompson twins. I think was the next big obsession of mine. I should listen to those lovely bells. Sorry, it's the DX in me. Dominic, Behringer Jupiter 8 on your list or not?
Yeah, I'd love one, honestly. I mean, I missed out. I was trying to get my beard on before when you were talking about it, so I didn't follow the chat. I mean, Sasquatch made a really good point in the chat. Have Behringer actually made a bad clone? They haven't really.
Yes, fair
everything
point.
has been, pretty good. No one's been going, oh, this is a dreadful clone. I bought a 2600. I had my name down for Korg. I rung them up. I said, take my money, and they'd sold out. So they totally missed out on that one. And I'm actually quite pleased because the 2600 I've got from Behringer here is just brilliant. And if the Jupiter 8 is anything like that in terms, not necessarily even in terms of sounding like a Jupiter 8, but in terms of fat oscillators, polyphonically kind of lovely big filtery Roland magic, it'll show quite a few people what a really old school polyphonic synth sounded like back in the day and was used to make those sounds, and I mean there is, I did mention there's a trouser flappiness quota associated with some synths, and I think it's the Jupiter 4s personally, with my own personal trouser collection, up at the top, and then the Jupiter 8 is just below it. The 2600's in there as well. The thing about the 2600 is the envelopes are just so sharp, and you can make drum sound. You can make a whole track out of it. I do get that the history of the people looking at these things with the thought that if I had a Jupiter 8 I could make better music is not the avenue to be going down. But it might inspire you. I mean, just there's a warmth factor when you put one of those things out the speakers, which is impressive. It really is. It does sound good. I think it's sort of memeing itself now, the Jupiter 8, isn't it? It's just become the thing that is so expensive. It's the pinnacle of the vintage synth things. And then you see everything else surrounding it in the same way that the 909 was the pinnacle, is the pinnacle, and kind of took over from the 808. People are buying 707s now, and they're really not that good.
I know.
And you see, and even 606s and stuff, it's like, if there's anything you should really be able to sample and use, and even if it's like a nice round robin way as a 606, there's no need to overpay on them. And I think, so therefore Jupiter 6s are coming up, and personally I think that was probably the poor one out of the Jupiter 4, Jupiter 6 and Jupiter 8, and I'm sure the Jupiter 8 will pop up the top soon as well. But yeah, love it. And to be honest, a rack mount version would be great for me. I don't particularly want Jupiter, any of the keys. I just unplugged my headphones, but I'll keep going. The Super Jupiter is actually more Jupiter 6 than it is Jupiter 8.
Yes, you're right.
And it was a sound on sound review where they put Jupiter 8 in a box, and it kind of took off from there. It does have some similarities. It's not quite a Jupiter 6, and it's not quite a Jupiter 8. But yeah, that's my favourite synth. I have a a code, Studio Electronics Code 8, which is like an
Okay.
Omega 8, which is my Jupiter 8. In fact, you can just see it there.
Oh yeah.
And that is like, to me, the epitome of a big 8-voice polyphonic synth. But it would have cost a lot more than this Jupiter 8 clone, I think.
So I've long said that this whole analog revival has been missing one big thing in recent years. Well, sorry, it's been addressed in recent years, and that is really good, affordable analog polysynths. Because everything's all been about monophonic stuff, and maybe if you're lucky, duophonic or paraphonic, but nothing that's true. Nothing. That's truly. You can hold two-hand chords down and get this big thing. And then Cryss has got that thing to his right there, the Moog 1, but it was expensive. It's not. It's not every man's or woman's. First choice because of the price. And then we're seeing Dave Smith come back with the Rev 4 Profits, which sound really, really nice. And then there was the thing that should have been sat here tonight that is somewhere in a customs clearance house in Stansted Airport, and something that Mark knows a lot about, which is the Arturia Polybrute. All right, yes, thank you, shut up. So the Polybrute was supposed to be there, but it's not. Maybe next week. But the Polybrute comes along at what UK price is about £2,100, and we're starting to see polysynths become more affordable, and that's, I think, a great thing, because for me, it's just all about big chords and stuff like that. So this Jupiter 8, the Oberheim clone that they're working on, and of course the CS80 clone, they're all very welcome in that department, because they're going to broaden that choice of analog polysynths, I think, which is a good thing. Hopefully it will be good. Fingers crossed. There you go. So that's all we have. I mean, it was just a picture we throw, and we always end up going down this long path of talking about Behringer and what they're doing, and but yeah, it's an interesting thing, and hopefully lots of people will be able to get their hands on those. Right, I think it's about time we made our guest work for his dinner. So, Marc Doty, where did it all start for you with synthesizers? Because you're known pretty much all over the world, and certainly as far as synthesizers are concerned, as being an historian. I would say an expert in many fields in that regard. You have very strong but well-informed opinions, which you are not frightened of sharing, and I admire you for that. I love you for it. You don't necessarily court controversy. It does kind of follow you around sometimes, but it's because you're passionate about synthesis and synthesizers. So I want to know, where did that passion start? How did it start? What was the seed that kind of got you there? Was it a particular instrument? Was it a particular record, a piece of music, or what? How did it all begin?
Well, initially, my dad made my brother this box that had a bunch of switches and lights on it, because there was some sort of science fiction-y sort of deal, and it's gone quiet like it did last time.
No,
okay.
We're still here.
Okay. I was terrified. Anyway, my dad made my brother this box with switches and lights, and I envied it. I was like 3 years old. I was like, I want that.
Was it just like a toy?
Yeah, it didn't really do anything,
okay.
But I was fascinated with being able to control things with switches and lights. Anyway, and again, tied to my brother, I was in the car with my family in 1976, and Steve Miller Band's "Fly Like an Eagle" came on the radio. May have been, anyway, and we used to play a game in the car where we'd identify musical instruments that we could hear. And when the synthesizer in that song came on, I sat there and I was like, what is that? What makes that sound? What is doing that? And my brother said, that's a synthesizer. And then I just fell completely into obsession. And he took me to a music store in 1979. And the first synthesizer I ever played was an ARP Odyssey, new in the store.
Wow.
And I just became, I took this pamphlet, which I still have, that has all of the ARP models in it, and it became my obsession. My mom bought me Wendy Carlos, a switched on Bach, and then I'm like, this whole thing, it's all synthesizer. And of course, the radio was full of really cool songs that I loved and bands that I loved that were using synthesizers, the Beatles and ELO. And I just became increasingly obsessed with, having a synthesizer, understanding synthesis, and being a rock star. So.
Yeah, I mean, that was one thing when I first kind of got to know you. You revealed this love of ELO, which I have maybe not as big a passion about them, but it kind of surprised me because I was expecting, the usual suspects. I was expecting, Kraftwerk. You mentioned Wendy Carlos, but Kraftwerk, Jar, Vangelis, Tomita, all of those things, and you basically come up with ELO, and they're not typically the sort of band that one associates with fueling somebody's synthesizer addiction.
That is a really crucial point, and I think part of that has to do with a UK-US divide, because all of the bands that introduced synthesizers to America and all the way that synthesizers sort of made the scene in America weren't about futuristic, all-synth compositions as much as it was, here's a rock song and here's a really cool new timbre that's in there too. The sort of futurism and the cold Kraftwerk sort of feel and all of that wasn't what delivered synthesizers to America. We kind of came around to that sort of thing in 1980 or 79 or so and moved more in that direction. And so I run into this a lot because people think that same thing about me. They're like, oh, this synthesizer guy, he likes Kraftwerk and he's really into so-and-so and he wants, analog drum machines. And I'm just like, no, I just like being able to author sound. I mean, that's what synthesizers are really for.
Yeah.
Of course, I do love all those bands. And in 1984 or whatever, I decided I was going to be an electronic dance musician and and then techno. I wanted to be a techno guy, sure, but I go back to the roots of hearing, and I always say this and it really annoys people, so I'm going to say it again. Paul McCartney did more for delivering the synthesizer to the general public than Kraftwerk ever did, just from Band on the Run alone.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that now because actually the internet provides this sort of mythology about how we all were very excited about futuristic dance music with synthesizers only in the 1970s. And I'm like, we weren't, but certainly more so in the UK and in Germany than the United States. You guys latched onto that sort of thing. And I didn't hear about Jar or Vangelis or those people until way, way later, because they just didn't have the impact, especially, at the age I was, which was, 10. That was not the music that was being blared on the radio or the record albums I was seeing in the stores. So that was never my influence. I looped back around to it.
Yeah, because I always kind of cite Gary Newman, Tubeway Army, as my kind of gateway into that. And I remember hearing it and thinking, what the hell's that? That's great. I want that. But what I forget often is that a few years before, I was listening to my mum's record collection, which was mostly Beatles and Simon and Garfunkel. And one of my most favourite albums, and still is to this day, is Simon and Garfunkel's Bookends. And Save the Life of My Child has this amazing Moog intro, and it never dawned on me that was a synthesizer. It was just an amazing sound and an amazing song and an amazing album. It just never dawned on me that was a synthesizer. It was only, I guess, maybe it's because on this side of the pond, maybe we're more about there's more about the image. And Gary Newman comes on. It's not just the sound, but it's the look, and it's the whole feel of it. Whereas I don't know, but then we had prog, and you had Yes and ELP and all that lot going on, and they were using synthesizers, but I don't think we kind of went, oh wow, look, synthesizers, until that sort of era.
Yeah, just to butt in here, I really have felt the same way, and I'm so glad that you expressed that, Mark, because I felt a bit like an oddball. And of course, I'm already heavily persecuted in these circles anyway, but I mean, that's very much my synthesizer experience. It's like, what is this crazy sound? My big synth experience was the Beatles and Pink Floyd, Edgar Winter Band. Paul Artola mentioned that as well. Like, those kind of sounds that were on classic rock radio really brought me into synthesizer. And I, again, like Kraftwerk, like, who the hell are they? Like, it wasn't till very much later that when I started hanging around a lot of my English friends that I really found out about that stuff.
Yeah, and as Manny said in the chat room, like Abbey Road, that had synths on it.
Yeah.
So I mean, I just remember you when you said you had this massive love of ELO, and I was like, wow, I just did not expect that. Was just broadsided me. But equally, and we've spoken at length about some of their work, and it's just absolutely brilliant.
Well, and also, that's where I loved ELO, because ELO was using synthesizers early on extensively.
Yeah.
Huge synthesizer presence that no one ever thinks about. And vocoders in 1977. The Out of the Blue album was just drenched with vocoders, which is why I have the Behringer over there. And no one ever, when you think of vocoder, everyone either cites Kraftwerk or some dance thing in the 80s. And they're like, no, vocoder was all over the place in the 70s. And it had nothing to do with the future or robots,
Did they, in the States, did they have like Sparky, hey Sparky? Did they have that tune there? It's like a kid's. Have you ever? Has no one ever heard this? Am I on my own?
Yeah, I think
All right,
so.
There's a record that was played to kids, and it must have been of my era. And it was an organ who could talk called Sparky.
Oh,
and it was
Sparky, magic organ.
Sparky, and that was the first time I ever heard a vocoder, which was kind of comedy vocoder is too far, but it wasn't a musical thing. It was like whoa, that's a weird sounding voice. Yeah. And you're right, ELO then came out with this, and that's Sparky the organ, and what are they doing? This is amazing. This is just brilliant. For
those of us on this side of the pond, again, we had electronic music force fed to us on the BBC through the radiophonic workshop.
Oh, totally.
Doctor Who and everything else. I mean, obviously, I know we won't get into the semantics of it, but we know that a lot of it wasn't synthesizers. It was great tape manipulation, etc. Blah blah blah. But it got that, and we had so much weird electronic music. From the likes of Delia and David Vorhaus and the rest of that lot. And yet we didn't kind of go, wow, synthesizers, until sort of the late 70s. Once punk was over, punk was an enema, cleared everything off, and here were synthesizers, young people making crazy sounds.
Perhaps some of it was the cultural aspect of it. I mean, in terms of how a band presented themselves. I mean, at the time that I was going to high school, and I think at least up 80s 90s at least, there a lot of those 80s movies playing to this, like, there are very particular crowds of people depending on what music you listen to. And when I see particularly the European synth stuff, synth pop, synth rock, whatever it was from the 80s, it had a very particular look to it. Not that all was the same, but when you saw something like Kraftwerk, I don't think that the synthesizers were really the most remarkable thing about it. When I listen to it, it's like I'm not really getting what everybody else gets out of this. But when you see the image of it and just everything that went along with that, their performance, the way they looked, that really created a cultural synth thing that happened. That it seems like a lot of especially you guys over in Europe, really enjoyed and kind of played into that, rather than it being more maybe for us Americans a little more part of existing musical formats, rock in that whole scene.
Yeah, I remember seeing Roxy Music on Old Grey Whistle Test, and at no point did I really look at Brian Eno and what he was doing with VCS. I was just like, it was Brian Ferry. It was just like, oh wow, that voice, those clothes, that style, that sound. But at no point did I go, what is he doing? Because that looks amazing. Because that wasn't the thing. It was all about the glam rock image, wasn't it? And it's just, he was making weird sounds. It kind of went with it. But sorry, Brian.
Also, like, punk had blown it away. So if you were listening to prog, and like Rick Wakeman on his keyboards and stuff, which was a big theatrical thing, you couldn't really talk about it if you wanted to when punk came along, because it was the antithesis to kicking out all of that stuff. So it just died, and suddenly this exciting non-keyboard based punk thing kicked off. And then off the back of that, when something like Tubeway Army came out, and this which was basically a guitar played on keyboards, really ripped the speakers apart, and suddenly you're going, oh, now I understand this. This is different. But it wasn't drum machines, that Tubeway Army had a live drummer, live bass player, but just to rip your head off kind of synth. And then in the UK, we then kicked off the huge new romantic kind of reaction to punk. And that was totally synths. So that was live band, just like Tubeway Army were, but synths playing over the top, and a very synth based kind of thing, which then just took off for the next kind of 10 years really. And that corresponded with my move out of school, having learnt piano, into look, I can afford a keyboard now. Look, there's that Roland or the Monopoly or whatever, which is what we started talking about tonight. So it was just perfect timing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was the thing. You said earlier on, Dom, that you were surprised that we had a Korg 700S in high school. I forgot to tell you the story. Basically, my music teacher went to get a guitar repaired, and they had this Korg 700S. This is in Suffolk, okay? This is the backwater of the UK. They could not shift it for love nor money, and so he basically said, "Oh, just give me, whatever, it was pence for it." And so they took it, and it was not a conscious decision to bring in a piece of music technology. It was just like he was like, "Oh, go on, take it for 50 quid," and they did, and that was it, and I was lucky. But as you said, Newman happened, Tubeway Army happened, the whole synth pop thing of the early 80s happens, and then that's when I meet my first synthesizer, and it all just connected on from there. That was my first synth, but what was your first synth, Marc Doty?
This is funny, and my first synth was a Roland Juno 106 that my mom bought for me. I think she got some sort of bonus check for something, and all I ever did was talk about synthesizers. Synthesizers this, and this synthesizer does this, and Mom, listen to this song. Yeah. And I think to shut me up, she thought it was worth several $100s to just put one in my hands. I learned synthesis on a Juno 106. And along with what Cryss was saying earlier, there's something special about the Roland interface, which is just really, it's really educational, and it really helps you understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Which it's interesting because I've had my toe in both the ARP and the Moog histories, and Bob Moog was such an advocate for the knob. He said it was much more ergonomic. It was totally, but then, sliders are much more visually indicative of what's happening. But anyhow, the Roland Juno 6, which is funny now because I have a tendency kind of obnoxiously to decry the Junos now, because people now act like these are the greatest synths that were ever made and that we've all worshipped them all the way along. And I keep on going, except for they were super cheap synths that Roland used DCOs that sounded so sterile that they had to put a chorus on there. The chorus literally was put on there to make up for just how severe the DCO sounded. And everyone's like, oh, that warm Juno sound. And I'm like, which is not to say that they're not great synths. And you can see in my Juno 6 demo, I think through the whole thing, I'm going, damn, this thing is really nice. But yeah, so it's funny that the Juno 106, which is a great synthesizer, was my first synthesizer, but it was not now everyone pays tremendous amounts of money for them, and I'm like, it's not this is not the thing that was special but it's become special, which people keep reminding me, like, well, Mark, history didn't stop when it stopped, for you. History's still happening. And in this point in history, the Juno 106 is a very desirable synthesizer.
Yeah.
But your point about how easy it is to figure it out is absolutely true. Because that's where I learned synthesis. It was my first synthesizer. I sat down. I didn't have the internet. I didn't have any friends that played synth. I played guitar with keyboardists who had workstations, and they didn't know anything about anything, so I didn't bother them. But to sit down and go, how does a synthesizer work, and how it's laid out is so easy to do that, like, without any help, without any YouTube videos or stuff, you're like, oh, okay, I get this. I can make this thing work and make sounds. And it ended up being a really great first synthesizer.
Oh, yeah.
Along that point, though, I want to just put in some of the chat question.
I'm just going to go to. Yeah, I'm going to sort of vacate. So I'm going to leave you three to chat amongst yourselves.
Rob's had enough.
Too much analog synths. So Andrew Brooks asks, "What is Mark's Desert Island synth?"
Well, it's a new one. And it's funny because we were just talking about it. It is, in fact, the Polybrute has been the synth that has just really ticked all of the boxes for me. I love the way it sounds. I love the functionality. I love the interface. And I often say to myself, if I lost everything, the first synth I would rebuy would be the Polybrute, because it basically does everything I want a synthesizer to do. And for years I've been like the monosynth guy. I just wanted monosynths because I love to get polyphony. There's nothing better than multi-tracking a monosynth. You get the biggest, richest, most beautiful sound that a lot of synths, polyphonic synths, could never provide, even the really great ones. But once I heard what the Polybrute could do for synthesis, not, playing, traditional synth idiom ideal situations, but really what I could do from a synthesis standpoint, where I had control over the harmonics of any sound in polyphony. That was just too much for me, and it's just really been the one that I am drawn to.
How do you feel about the 6 voices though on a modern poly? I mean, you're obviously love to do monosynth stuff or in duophonic things, but do you feel like it's enough? Do the modulation capabilities of it make up for that?
The thing I think, and perhaps. And I don't know, this is a great question, because this is the thing I bring up a lot of times, because a lot of people ask me that. In fact, I see people go, hey, that synth is really cool, but 6 voices isn't enough for me. And I always kind of, perhaps annoyingly ask, well, what are you doing, trying to play piano on it? I mean, in what context are you doing a wide spread of frequencies in one single timbre? Because I would never do that. I mean, and especially synth timbres are so often, the ones we really like are so dominating. I feel like, no, you shouldn't play, this sound in the bass and in the treble at the same time, because then there's no room for anything else. Totally. And so I tend to think of things more orchestrally, in the sense, and like the synthesizer plays its role in a song where it needs to be. And I find that I don't need, 12-note chords in one timbre really ever. And if I do, I grab something like a Triton or, something, if I'm going to play piano, that's what I do.
Well, one of the things that I don't hear addressed about it as often, and I completely agree. In fact, one of my pet peeves as a guitarist would be that the keyboardists on the workstation would be covering everything, and they would just make the live mix a mess, because it's like all over the bass, the guitars, the vocals, even hitting up into some of the drum frequencies, but like long release kind of material. So if you're having 3 or 4 voices with long releases, then 6 voices is sometimes not enough, is where, like, that's where I feel like 6 voices always feel a little bit short to me. Now that said, if you have a big enough timbre, like playing the Moog Matriarch or something, there's some really enormous timbres in there that, yeah, you can play 2 or 3 notes and it just feels so much sonic space that you wouldn't want to add anything to it.
Well, and I think that's a really good point. And people always say that. They're like, it's not about how many notes are played, it's about the tails. And then I'm always, and I think what it really betrays is a different sort of thinking, especially now with younger people. I'm not saying this is you necessarily, Cryss, but what I do is like, if the instrument won't do what I need it to do, then I will find a way around that. But I think the common thinking now is that people are like, I need this to do every single thing I would ever want a thing to do. And I suppose if you're spending $2,500 on the synthesizer, that makes sense. But like, if I had tails that were too long for me to pull off with 6, I'd multi-track, which is what I do anyway. It's just like, I'm going to need to do this sound in 2 tracks instead of 1. But the Eurorack concept seems to be that everything needs to be happening at once because it's being controlled by a DAW or something else. And I think people are just like multi-tracking less because they want it all to happen at once, or that's more suitable for what the DAW does. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, you're totally right. Totally right. I mean, it's like, it's a shame to have it to limit anything to anything in these days. So the idea of an 8 note step sequencer in a Mother 32 or 16 note step sequencer seems a bit limiting, but where you're building an analog style synthesizer where you're literally duplicating each note, duplicating filters, duplicating everything, and adding into the complexities of keeping everything in tune, you don't need that much stuff. If you're using it to make the kind of big sounds you're expecting it, like big monophonic sounds that happen to be playing chords, and you're holding 6 notes down, it's going to sound horrendous, And if you need to make a nice smaller sound, then use something else, I think. But you're right with the tails, but you don't really need to hold more than 3 notes down on that kind of thing to get the effective. I mean, people, by all means, I'm not trying to gatekeep the way people make tunes now, but certainly at the moment, there's that thing about you never use more than 5 sounds. You've got a kick, a snare, a hat, a voice, and a synth, or a kick, a bass, a hat, a voice, and so whatever you might want to be doing. You've got to make every sound really count, and a Polybrute's going to make that sound that really, really counts. But we're not talking about lovely fingered, Beethoven style piano pieces here. And I'm coming from I'm a keyboard player. It's really, really rare that I've ever noticed, even since back in the day, that you run out on 6 notes. It's usually because I'm playing something too complicated for the piece rather than the limitation on the synth. I agree with you. But look at it on paper and chat about it on Gearspace or whatever and go, you've got 6 notes, 12 notes.
We were guilty of that.
Have you ever used this thing? Have you actually gone out and made a tune with it and come across this as an issue? It's
the other thing that makes it so much easier too is like when I play the Juno, like I hate the note stealing. It drives me nuts, unless I'm being very simple. But on the OB6, which is also 6 voices, it seems much more transparent about that. And I think it has to do with the note priority. That last note priority seems, at least for me, seems a lot more comfortable to play with less voices than it does low note priority or something else.
Right.
That's interesting. That could definitely
whatever.
have an effect. Yeah.
I mean, we were guilty of it when the Polybrute launched, and we were going through the specs, and we all went, 6 voices. What are they thinking? At least the Moog had 8 or 16. It was just like, what? And I mean, I wish I could say that I could counter that by saying, well, I've played one and it doesn't, maybe next week. But everything that I've watched, whether it's been Mark's videos or whether it's been other people's demonstrations or performances with the Polybrute, it doesn't seem to ever be a problem. Whatever sound or whatever patch they're playing, it just sounds like a really, really nice polysynth. And
I mean, Cryss, how do you get over it with a guitar? Because you've only got 6 on there.
My hypocrisy was always pointed out by Andrew Brooks. Yes.
How did you end up working at Paisley Park, Mark?
Well, Prince called me on the phone and he said, "Hey, I've heard a lot about you. Why don't you come work for me?" And I was like, "I don't know, dude." But I finally know. It's actually the opposite of that. It's there's an hour and 15 minutes telling this story.
There is.
Basically, I spent a lot of my youth obsessed with Prince and his musical talent. And I don't know if you guys remember Tony Robbins, the motivational speaker.
No.
Yeah. Yes.
American motivational speaker. I'm not a motivational speaker sort of person at all. But my friend worked for him, and he kind of shared some of these ideas that he was being taught. And then he forced me to go to a Tony Robbins seminar in LA, actually. And I came away with some like ideas about how I could do things, you know? So basically I started calling Paisley Park with the interest in getting a recording contract with Paisley Park Records. And so I just started calling them, and I employed ridiculous amounts of charm as per the Tony Robbins paradigm. And I made friends through harassing these people over the phone so that they actually knew who I was. And I submitted music, which unfortunately was submitted right at the point where Paisley Park Records was closing. And I actually have a recording of Duran Wells from Paisley Park calling me going, "Yeah, your music's pretty good, man, but Paisley Park Records is closing." I was like, but then my girlfriend at the time was getting a graduate degree in Minneapolis. And I'm like, "I'm coming with you." So I came with her. And then I just started like harassing Paisley Park from in town. And I tried to get a job at the MPG store, which I had retail experience. So they basically said, "Yeah, we'll hire you." It didn't happen that year, but I came back the next year, and the guy who had interviewed me for that job, we hit off really well. And he hired me as his administrative assistant at Paisley Park Retail. And that's how it happened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember those MPG stores because I used to hang out at the one in London with the same kind of motivation that maybe he'll come in. He only ever visited the place once, I think, when it opened. I've got a picture of that somewhere. But no, I mean, we always used to hang out there in the hope that he might, something might rub off, or he might turn up and he'll go, "Yeah, you come with me. Let's go and make millions of dollars." It never happened.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating thing. And you were in the audience. See, this is when he premiered Gold, and you were there. And I've watched. I've got scratchy videos that I copied off TV shows of that, and I watch it as it's fascinating. I love that performance. And you were there, man. You were in Paisley Park's soundstage when he did all that. I mean, tell us a little bit about Paisley Park. I mean, we stood outside it, but you've been inside it. You've worked there. I mean, God.
We started off working at a building in downtown Minneapolis where retail and his wardrobe department were. They were, right, for whatever reason, they were downtown. But he decided he was going to close that out about halfway through the time that I had worked there. And I was told we were moving to Paisley Park, and I was like, "Oh my God!" But of course, they couldn't know that I was so into the whole thing. So I was like, "Yeah, whatever. That's a longer drive for me." I don't know if anyone thought of that, but whatever. But we got to go there, and we got offices, and we were just there. And then, I had seen him a lot of times because I participated in the Love for One Another performances. Yeah. So I got to see him a lot when I was there, and we got kind of free reign to walk around Paisley Park when these things were going on. But then to actually move there, I was there all the time. The band was there. Prince was there. It was way more exciting to be there.
What's this thing about the escalator?
So there was, my office was on the second floor, and there was these stairs that go away from the front door. The front door comes in, and then there's stairs that go down towards the front door, and there's stairs that go away from the front door. I wanted to talk to Prince, but you didn't do it. As an employee, they said, number one, don't ever talk to him. And number two, don't even let him know who you are, because someday he will ask you to do a thing that you cannot do and you'll get fired. So everyone was like, don't stay away from Prince. So I was like, yeah, but I'm super cool. So, so I was going up the stairs to my office. It was kind of late in the afternoon. No one was really around. And Prince came around the corner from whatever studio was upstairs at the end of the hall, past the Doves was where he was coming from. And he turned the corner as I was coming up the stairs. And I was like, okay, this is it. Prince and I totally alone for the first time. I mean, it's not like a conversation is going to start, but I'm going to say hi to this guy. So walking up the stairs, he's coming down, and I'm like, and the stairs are pretty narrow too. So I'm like, and then all of a sudden he just starts running down the stairs like really fast, which was interesting to watch because he had these white, fluffy, furry boots on. Anyway, and then he gets to the bottom of the stairs and he just runs off into the distance. And I'm like, wait. No, it was so awkward and bizarre that I was just in shock. I'm like, so I guess we're not going to talk. Okay, I'll go back to work. It was very weird.
So wait a minute. So you submit your music and they shut the label down. You work in the props department and they close it. And then you meet Prince finally and he runs away.
This is the amazing thing. I had an experience with Prince. I was in the same room as Prince. He was like, 6 feet away from me, talking to us because we were like in the audience. We were fan club members and we got there early, and we were there, excuse me, for the sound check. And we walk into the auditorium. They'd booked the first few rows, and we all just kind of mingled in there. And my wife looks at me and says, behind you. And I look around, and there he is in this kind of green velour jumpsuit type thing with big heels on, with his feet up on the chair like behind me, and he's just saying, "Hi, how you doing?" And it was just like he didn't run away anywhere; he stayed.
This is something for the resume. Like, I made Prince run away. Prince was scared of me. I mean, that's.
Man, you can have such a lot of fun if you're Prince, can't you? Because you're everywhere you go. There's always someone going behind you. You could just completely.
But he was a joker, wasn't he? He was a real joker.
Oh yeah,
practical joker.
He was a hilarious guy. Just absolutely so funny. And I used to I would be there before shows. I'd be hanging out with the band, and he'd come in to talk to the band, and so I'd just be right there with. The MPG, and Prince would be right there talking. There'd be conversations going on. I never really directly talked to him, but he joked constantly, and everybody was cracking up the whole time. He was really funny. Isn't
it funny? You used to say, Prince is, and I still can't process that he's not here anymore. It still hasn't hit me, But when Bowie went, big, hit me big. With Prince, for me, he's constantly. It's just weird. It's very strange. Let's move on. I want to get to 2 or 3 things. We've got a question here. Let's do this one from the audience. So here we go. I Sing the Body Electric, which sounds like a Prince song title, doesn't it? I Sing the Body Electric. That's kind of got a Prince vibe to it. Can you also tell Mark that his multi-chapter synth tutorials are awesome, and I bet I'm not the only one here to think that. You're not. That's true. When you come up with these things, I mean, sometimes there's 20 or more parts to this. I want to know how you do this. Do you sit down and say, right, with a piece of paper, say, I'm going to do a video on this bit, this bit, this bit, this bit, and this bit? Or do you just record one big thing and chop it up? What's the process? Because you really do go into a huge amount of detail, and you're not reviewing, you are demonstrating very well. What's your process when you're putting this stuff together?
Well, it all goes back to my original motivation was there were a group of us in the world who really were into analog synths. We'd see an analog synth on eBay and we'd be like, wow, that's really cool. I want that. But what does it sound like? Because sure, we can point to examples of the mini Moog all over the place, and you hear a mini Moog in a song and you're like, wow, that's a mini Moog. But really, what does an MS-20 sound like? And at that point, none of us knew. We didn't know what songs they had been in. There was less information about it on the internet. So like, we didn't really know what any of these things sounded like. We just knew that we would probably like it and they were super cool. So I had the idea based on a thing that I did for Nick Batt for his top 20 synths history that had the mini Moog, and he wanted me to sort of demonstrate, like, talk about the mini Moog and some of the things about it. So I was like, well, I just want to give people a sense of what the individual components of it sound like. So I did that, and then after that, I sort of realized, like, people want to know what these synths that I have sound like. And the best way for me as a musician isn't for me to play a song with it, because you hear me play a song with a synthesizer, you're hearing my synthesis skills, you're hearing my songwriting skills, you're hearing my production, I hesitate to call them skills. And so that's not a realistic portrayal of what, if you're a person who wants to buy this, you want to hear what the components sound like so you can decide whether it's something that you can do what you would do as a synthesist with it. So I thought, I'm going to break this down and just play oscillators by themselves and filters by themselves. And so that's always been my structure. So when I get a synthesizer in, I just basically, if I'm lucky, all of the functions, all of the videos that I'm going to do are right there in front of me, because there's this section, there's this section, there's this section, there's this section. And what I tend to do is I will record them all at once as much as I possibly can, which is really easy with a Roland SH-101, but is absolutely impossible with Polybrute. So then I end up doing them in chunks. I'll do 5 or 6 videos, and then at another time 5 or 6 videos, and so it depends, but ideally it all happens at once. And I just improvise because I'm an educator and I know what the functions are, so I don't write scripts or anything. I just turn on the camera and go. Okay. And that's basically what I do.
No, that's fascinating. So I mean, I kind of had this vision of you, hitting record and then just going through everything, and then just doing massive editing sessions and chopping it up. But because we don't necessarily see, we only see your many ringed fingers in the video. We don't see you wearing clothes, so it doesn't give away that it's more than one session. But they're fascinating things. So the other couple of things I wanted to ask, and then I'll open it up to everyone else, is about your last two kind of main, or your current main role, and the role you had before that. So you were part of the Bob Moog Foundation. Mm-hmm. I remember you coming over here to the UK a few years ago, giving a lecture at Synthfest, and then for the last few years you've been employed by Buchla. So how did those two jobs kind of manifest, and what did they involve, and how do they differ from each other?
Yeah, it basically, when the Bob Moog Foundation started, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the place I should work, because I had obsessively studied synthesizer history, basically throughout the end of the 80s and all of the 90s. And once the internet got to a point where it could be functional, I was on news groups and forums just blathering constantly like I do, actually, which is, kind of my catchphrase. But once Bob died and Michelle started the Bob Moog Foundation, I was like, gosh, that's a place I should work. And so I just started harassing her. There's this hilarious story where I found her on Facebook, and she was on, and I sent her a message telling her about how much her father's work had shaped my life and how excited I was that, things were happening for the Bob Moog Foundation, and nothing happened. And then she went offline, and I was like, oh, I have pissed off the daughter of my hero. But she came back on later and said, was really said, thank you, and that's really cool, and tell me more about what you do. And I did. And I think she saw my videos that existed at that time, which there weren't as many, considerably less. And I mean, my Minimoog video was the most popular Minimoog video on YouTube for many years. It may actually still be, I haven't checked in a while, but it was the most viewed Minimoog video, even more than Bob Moog demonstrating the Minimoog, which is a little bit weird. But and then she was like, wait a minute, this idiot's probably a decent resource. So we just kept talking about it. And then when the foundation got to a point where they could hire me, they did, and hired me as an archive and education specialist, where we worked on creating the Dr. Bob's Sound School curriculum. And then I helped interpret the items in various archival collections as a person who came from the context of obsessively studying the synthesizers, the history of those synthesizers, the musicians that use those synthesizers, the musical styles, and synthesis in general. So that's basically what I did there. And I was originally hired at Buchla to be the Buchla historian, which is a hard job because no one's kept very good notes. And the notes that exist, well, actually, several people have a lot of the content, including Don's own son and Rick Smith. I mean, there are people who have collected a lot of content, but it's not out there. Bob put a huge amount of his content out there, and I was fortunate to have access to it, but there's much less about Don. But anyway, the company sort of took a different angle where celebration of Don really wasn't the focus. And so then I just became whatever was necessary. I took the most crash course of crash courses in learning Buchla, which is not the easiest. And then I became the QA for Buchla, and then I did a lot of the graphic design. I designed a bunch of the boxes. I became customer service. I became an inventory manager. I basically do whatever needs to be done.
Right. And are you enjoying it?
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's so much different. It's the first synth company I've actually literally worked for, and it's very interesting to be on that side of a synth company, and it's made me develop a tremendous amount of sympathy for all synth companies and all the things that we see them go through online all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you're seeing things from both sides. Is there anything? I think it was Native VS in the chat room was asking, can you give us any kind of juicy gossip without breaking any NDAs about forthcoming Buchla, products and ventures? Anything we should get excited about?
Yeah, I mean, there isn't. Well, I haven't signed an NDA, so let me tell you everything. No, the big thing that's going to happen, and it's not a secret. I don't know if everybody knows it. I get a lot of email asking if this is true, but we are putting out a new Buchla music easel. Which should be announced relatively soon. It features the 208C, which is our upgraded version of the 208 module. There's a lot more functionality there than previously existed in the easel. We redesigned the 218 keyboard. Now there's more functionality and more stability in that. And then there's a new case, which is going to be super, super cool, but that's all I can say.
Okay. Excellent stuff. Guys, have you noticed any other questions in the chat room that we need to throw at Mark?
Let me ask one myself before I've got some saved, but
Sure.
One that I'm particularly curious about. So, I mean, you've done all these great tutorials, and a series that I recently went back and rewatched was about the history of polyphony, and I'm not going to ask you about polyphony in particular, but
don't do it.
Although thanks for arguing with me about it, I really appreciated that. But when it comes to like the videos that you make, the tutorials, this research into the history of polyphony, the terminology, about getting it right, about getting everybody to understand what all this stuff is, what is the reason that you do that? What is the driving force that causes you to do all of that?
I think that's a really, yeah, that's a really great question. And a lot of people are like, what is wrong with you? And to be honest, I mean, there is sort of an autism spectrum element to it. I do, when I'm interested in, it's the same thing with the clocks. When I find something that interests me, I am obsessed with it and I can't escape it. And I find all the details in, basically observe how all of the details interact, and it becomes like overwhelmingly and consumingly the interest of my life. And basically the problem with the history of synthesizers is that they've always been a product more than they've ever been like an instrument, in the sense that like when the violin came out, the people writing the history about the violin weren't violin companies. It was normal people who were interested in the history of the violin. Mm-hmm. And so we constantly get this weird revisionist history put out by the people who want to sell synthesizers, and we accept that from them. And then the second part of it is people who just talk about things that they like develop concepts that they eventually take as facts about the things that they like. And the internet is terrible for that. And I have, very unfortunately, watched terminology morph into useless terminology over the time that I've been on the internet and interested in synthesizers. So I just kind of, it's beneficial for me as a person who talks about synthesizers all the time to have terminology that is effective for the descriptive and categorical uses that I need to be able to effectively educate people about how these things work and what their history is. So when I have a term that really works well, like duophonic, and all of a sudden the meaning is in question because basically the telephone effect, I'm just like, no, here's how it really is. And then there's a weird like there's a fighting back that happens because people have like sort of grown up in these communities where certain terms were used in certain ways. And now suddenly here's this idiot questioning what they know as experience. And so I end up basically constantly reiterating the actual historical elements, which I feel are really the only valid things, not experience or conversation, but really the facts that led to these terms being created and used. And I kind of lean on that more than what people have heard other people say on the internet. And sometimes that makes people really angry. But
well, you do have an influence because of that. And I know it's very much appreciated. Just as a follow-up question, Synth Addict asks, and I think it goes right along with what you were just talking about here. It said, Mark is responsible for gas for a lot of synths and great demos. How does it feel to be so influential? And I think that's the question that I kind of want to focus on. Of course, he asks, does he feel bad for emptying our wallets too? And you can address that. But what kind of effect are you seeing in the synth world? I mean, your name is known and you're so well respected. How does that affect you as a person?
Well, I mean, the main way that I see an effect of that is that synthesizer companies love me. And that's my main goal has been really, I mean, that's the benefit that I see in it is synthesizer companies recognize that what I do sells their synthesizers. That unfortunately leads some people to think that I am there to sell synthesizers. And I have gotten the shill label a number of times. But the truth of the matter is I want to document these synthesizers in a way that is beneficial to people. And companies want me to do that because it benefits them. And then I benefit because I often get the synthesizers I demonstrate. But it's not the situation that people would think, like somebody comes to me and is offering me a thing. I only demonstrate the synths that I'm really interested in. So the real benefit I see is it has really sort of elevated me in the synthesizer industry to a point where I get to weigh in on things, and different companies have asked for my input on their designs, and I get to participate in the synth industry. But as an educator, I'm happy that people benefit from my work. I'm not really that interested in being influential, because I'm just describing the facts of what the things are. The only time I kind of am interested in having influence is fighting linguistic change. But other than that, yeah, it's a weird situation, and I would have never expected that any of this had happened the way that it did.
Question here, and I'm going to have to do it. Okay, it is about the whole paraphonic thing, but in as Sasquatch says, in a simple sentence, if possible, can you sum up the paraphony polyphony situation?
Yes, and this is one of the great moments of my life, figuring out how to say this. Polyphony is about how many notes can be played simultaneously. Paraphony is about how notes are articulated in one specific way. A paraphonic synth is a synth that no matter how many notes it can play, all of those notes go through a single articulative structure, a single filter, a single amp, single envelope, maybe a couple of envelopes. Polyphony does not address how each note is articulated. It only tells you how many notes can play at one time.
Yeah.
Now, people don't necessarily like the fact that when you play an instrument that is paraphonic, the articulations re-trigger, or they only happen once, and that makes playing really weird, because people expect synthesizers to play like pianos do, where you just play the notes and the notes do their thing, and that's really cool. The paraphonic structure was an inexpensive way to address polyphony that allowed people to get things that sounded like polyphonic synthesizers. But people were like, wait, this doesn't sound exactly like a polyphonic synthesizer that I'm accustomed to, because it has these weird limitations. And it led to people to start saying, well, it's not real polyphony. But what it isn't is it's not real articulation. The polyphony is still there. In fact, most paraphonic synths can play more notes than the polyphonic synths that are articulated per note. Something that Bob Moog pointed out. But yeah, so that is basically it. Paraphony, a paraphonic synth, you're just talking about how many filters it has, basically. And a polyphony is how many notes any synth anywhere can play.
Makes sense to me.
Good
I
sentence.
can't really argue with that. Yeah, I mean, it's a long sentence, but I can't argue with it.
Can I ask a couple? That's
yeah, go for it.
And thank you for that. That makes sense to me too. I don't see how anyone could possibly argue with that concept. One from Inky in the chat that was saying, can you ask Mark who were his biggest influences, or are his biggest influences, and who did you enjoy meeting most?
Well, Prince was one of them that I got to meet, obviously.
Briefly.
In ways. I was around
running
him
away.
many times. Well, that was only one instance. There were plenty of times I was actually in the same room with him while people were talking, and he was talking to people I was with. But yeah, being around Prince was amazing, and he was a huge, huge influence.
Outside of that, though?
Outside of Prince, I've met a variety of people like Howard Jones and Gary Newman, Herb Deutsch, who is Moog related, right there at the beginning of Moog, and I've Stevie Wonder. I got to meet Stevie Wonder, but there's been quite a cavalcade of people who were influential for me in regard to synthesizers, and I haven't met all of them, but I've gotten to meet a surprising number of them. The person that probably was the most influential for me ever, Wendy Carlos. I had the incredible honor of meeting Wendy Carlos and sitting down with her and hanging out with her for a time. And that was probably, because that's so uncommon. You don't really get to meet Wendy Carlos. that one's probably one of the top experiences, I'd say.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And the other thing was, what's your place like where you at in terms of how things are wired up and stuff? I see lots of lovely keyboards behind you. Are they all? I mean, I guess my point was, if you're making videos, what I've found is it's different to making music, and I end up unpatching stuff and moving stuff around. And I like to keep everything kind of plugged in. So if I want to make some music, I can just go. Are you able to do both? Is everything kind of ready to go if you want it, or do you end up doing lots of plugging in and so forth?
There really isn't room in this room for shooting. And also, I really want a top-down view so that people can see everything that I'm doing. So I actually have 2 rooms that I work in, and one of them is just a room with lights. And I use a 1930s sewing desk as my my table. But yeah, so like if I'm demonstrating a synth, it's in that room on the table with all the lights pointing down at it and the microphone, and everything's all in there. And this is just basically where everything, what would be, if I had the time more, the recording studio. But right now it's like a storage room, unfortunately. But yeah, so not everything is currently hooked up. There is a plan that I have that will allow everything to be hooked up exactly how I would like, and I have not pursued it yet because I am busy doing all of the other synthesizer things, which is, I think, something I need to examine in my life.
and you, when you do record stuff, whether it's for your own pleasure, but also for your videos, you're multi-tracking, not in a DAW, but you're using the good old Roland VS880 still, aren't you?
I have a VS880 and a VS1680, and I do that. It's getting to be such a chore to get the music off of that thing because I have to burn it to CD to get it out of there. I mean, typically, what I have also said to myself, what I should do is like record it how I want it, and then record the tracks individually into a DAW so that I can have them. So I can actually, do effective equalization and other things. But I just want to turn the thing on, start playing. And anytime I have to wait for booting and then load up a program and then set up the way the program needs to hear what's happening, it zaps my creativity. So I just want to turn it on and go, this allows me to do that. So
makes sense.
Cool.
Makes sense.
So Adam asks, what other instruments interest you? If you never took to synths, would you be a drummer or a guitar man or neither?
I also play drums. I am not a super metrically solid drummer, but I am a very creative drummer. a lot of the songs that I have on the internet are me playing drums to my music. And a lot of them are heavily edited so that they sound like I can actually play drums. But I do like drums. But I think if I wasn't a keyboard player, I would just be a composer of whatever instrument because it's the music that's at the core of all of this. And ultimately, I don't care if it's a synthesizer or a musical instrument or otherwise. Oh, and also here. Look at this. Cryss, I bet you don't have a Washburn Bantam. Yeah.
Wow. Nice. Headless.
That's what real rock looks like. No, it isn't.
Awesome.
I can't play guitar and I want one of those.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of those instruments that I couldn't play but want desperately.
It's super cool.
What was the other one? Because there was Washburn, but there was begin with an S.
Well, Steinberger made the headless, And I think most guitarists would say that's just one step past the keytar.
Which is why I like it. I was always, when I was younger, I was like, I want the guitar that, because I used to go, what's with the sunburst wood, Strat body? Stop. Like, do something creative. And then the things they did that were creative, I was like, oh, no. So I was just to say, if I was going to have a guitar, it would just be the stick. And then the 80s thing happened. I was like, ooh, that's what I want.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's funny because, of course, guitars started with hollow bodies, but the first solid body, to my knowledge, was done by the famous guitarist Les Paul, of course, who the model is named after. But he made a guitar, I think it was called the Log, that was just basically 4x4 or something with a neck on it. That was it. So we're just going in cycles here.
I've become slightly obsessed about a guy on YouTube who makes guitars out of shovels. It's called a shovel guitar, and the good thing about it is it's only got 4 strings, and he tunes them so it's a chord. So it's like a slide. Effectively, you're playing a slide guitar. You've got the shovel. You've got the bit, the shovelly bit of the shovel is where the pickup goes, and it sounds amazing. And the good thing is that if you tune a normal guitar and take the 2 strings off, because I can't play to the same tuning, it really sounds like you can play guitar because just hitting it is kind of in tune. But well worth a look at, and he gives instructions on how to build this thing, and it's quite a sort of bluegrassy kind of thing. But shovel guitar, it just sounds amazing, really good.
Check that one out.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
Well, maybe a couple of questions about just gear questions, because people are always interested in gear, and we've had several. One from I Sing the Body Electric and Eric Ribeiro.
Eric.
Let me take old and then go to new first. So, Eric asks, what is the most obscure but historically significant synth or electromechanical you've owned or taken apart?
Also, hi Eric. I know Eric. That has to be the Hammond Nova chord. That was the thing that was just unbelievable. And it was a great experience having that thing. And I wish I would have had any sort of technical prowess that would have allowed me to continue to have it. Also, the Korg PS 3100, there's never been that thing. Also, wish I had the technical prowess to maintain it. Those have been the things. I also, I still am in possession of a friend of mine's RCA Theremin. It doesn't have the antennas, and it definitely needs to be reworked, but I do have it. And that's all I can think of, at least right now.
Was that Nova chord? Was that the one you sold to Danny?
Yes.
Yeah.
That Danny brought back to life.
Yeah.
And then it was used in the as you know, the Hollow Sun product, Nova chord.
Sounds amazing. Yeah.
So you've all played my Nova chord.
I have tickled your Nova chord in a virtual sense.
So, follow-up question to that. I Sing the Body Electric is asking about your relationship with the Sequential Pro 2, and let me maybe expand that and go. I think you're somebody that is well known for your love of vintage synthesizers, and of course you've talked about going back and finding the true story on all these things. But of modern synths, of which you have quite a few modern synths, and on your channel you've done extensive tutorials on synthesizers like the Micro Freak, the Polybrute, and the UDO Super 6. Of these modern synthesizers, what are some of the ones that are your favorite? And particularly if you would also talk about the Pro 2, because I Sing the Body Electric had also asked about that.
Yeah, I don't know if you can. Yeah, it's right over there. The Pro 2 really changed my life because I think it was the first time. I'm not saying this is the first time it ever happened. It was the first experience I had where someone made a digital synth that did everything the way that I, as an analog person, would really want it to be done, and to give me the power that digital functionality actually provides in order to actually make analog sound. The Pro 2 was a revolution for me because I realized I had 100% control over the oscillators, and although they are totally digital, I could make them sound to what a digital person would think was terrible. Like, I could damage the waveform, I could damage the amplitude, I could damage the tuning simultaneously, And I realized doing just those things gives you something that sounds very much like a very old, messy analog oscillator. And I realized that, weirdly, digital, the thing that I had decried for all of those many years, finally gave me the opportunity to make the analog sounding synth that I had always wanted. So I could basically imitate some of the really messy old analogs and also have the control and the functionality to make it do not that. And then it has analog filters as well. So it really became the synth that allowed me to have the best of both worlds. And also the digital functionality was a lot of fun. The things you can do with the digital functionality and the sounds that are in there. It really was kind of a revolution for me, which has allowed me to really enjoy the Super 6 as well, because those oscillators are really unique in how amazingly good they sound. And I feel like I don't really get to criticize digital anymore because digital has finally caught up to the aural joy that analog provides. They've finally stopped trying to do perfection and started to do tone. And it's a different world now. And I kind of feel like, oh, okay, well, there's no point in me doing what I do anymore, because like you can get great sounding digital synthesizers now. The Micro Freak, that stupid thing. I'm at Synth Reactor. And Brian, my friend from Arturia, he's like, have you played the Micro Freak? And I'm like, what am I going to do with this little toy plastic digital thing? And he's like, sit down and play it right now. I'm like, oh, okay. And I sat down, and then I was there for an hour. And then I was like, hey, do you need somebody to demo this? Because, and I got to say, it's one of my favorite synthesizers.
Isn't it, though? Isn't it? It's amazing, the tone that you can get out of it. I've got mine, where is it? Right over here. And I was absolutely shocked by it because, I've got some good stuff in the studio. I liked it. And I'm sitting there, I did a sound set for it, and I was using it in recordings with like, man, I would have never guessed this was the Micro Freak. Like listening to it in a song, just some of the tones you can get out of it are amazing. It's shockingly good.
I hooked it up to my Matrix Brute, and on polyphonic Matrix Brute sounds, then bolstered by the Micro Freak, it's like, who would ever want anything else? So this is it,
So is the future of digital in synth based, like taking advantage of FPGAs and stuff, or are you finding anything VST based, in computer based, touching that analog nerve that much these days?
Here is where the really interesting part comes into play. And I've realized now that my anti-digital viewpoint, which is kind of an exaggeration, but what the real problem isn't digital production of sound as much as it is lack of interface. I absolutely hate looking at anything on a screen that's a musical instrument that I'm playing. Because I want... And this is me. I'm not saying this is how everyone else should feel. This is definitely opinion. But for me, I want an instrument to be a physical thing that I interact with. I want to interact with it in ways that generate outcomes. And so that's really at the core. And that's why I still am separated from software, is because I can't sit down at a computer and, not touch the thing I'm playing. I can, and I have, but that's not where the joy lies in it. I like the physical interaction with the thing that is doing the thing. And I know there are controllers, and controllers have got really amazing too, but I don't know, it's a psychological thing with me. I want to play the instrument. I want to hold the guitar, if I can use that as a sort of metaphor,
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. And even if people are doing it subconsciously, it makes a huge difference. I mean, even with I haven't got much modular. I really haven't. I know it looks like it's not that much. There are things that you can run like a Morphogene, which are purely digital sound manipulation type tools, which I could run as a VST. It would sound exactly the same. But there's something about just being able to lean over and grab something and move it and instantly feel the change that will makes you play it in a different way, you know. And it is playing, it's an instrument just the same. And certainly with analog synths, with, you know, knobs, and I've got stuff here, even if it sounds the same as two identical things, you'll play it differently, you'll make different sounds out of it if it's a physical attribute. And it applies to MIDI controllers as well. Omnisphere is really interesting because when they enabled support for things like the Prophet 6, and so you can literally go down and say, I'm using this synthesizer as an input device to Omnisphere, and they've kind of made Prophet 6 style sounds to suit the Prophet 6, so you're turning the filter and the filters there. That really took it to another level. It was a brilliant thing. It made a lot of press at the time, and it's still there. They're still adding more and more synths. And that's the closest I've got when, you know, to something thinking, oh, actually, do you know what? It almost feels like the sound's coming from inside this device. I'm getting that feel, you know, and they've specifically gone out and said, okay, we're going to support these 20 different synths, and we're actually going to implement sounds from those synths if you want to use them, but you don't have to, you know, go and load something else up. And it makes a huge difference, even just kind of in your head in the way that you're creating on this stuff. So I totally agree with you. It's a really good point.
You know, that's kind of an interesting thing. I don't have as much problem with like soft synthesizers. Again, I think it just comes down to I like visual nature anyway. So, I mean, it's not as great as programming a Moog 1, but I get along fine with virtual stuff. But the thing that kind of separates me from that instrument feeling that you guys are talking about is using sequencers. And I just kind of been thinking about it. And I don't have anything against sequencers because I love a lot of sequencer music. And some of the people in our chat room make really great music with sequencers. But when I come to sit down and to play something, like I feel very disconnected. I think that's I mean, it just kind of a realization right now as you guys were talking that maybe that's the thing. Like I'm not pressing notes either by keys or by, you know, on a neck or something, and that's why I feel disconnected with sequencers. Sorry, I just epiphany in a moment. Like, oh, I think I understand why now.
It's a very good point that you make, and very valid, because most people will be saying, well, it's not the same, doesn't sound the same, it's not quite as I've compared them, it's not, and actually in their heads it's actually like it just doesn't feel the same, and that's enough justification to say I prefer the original. That's purely enough. It's just not used as an argument very often, or even it has never even occurred to me, to be honest.
Fascinating stuff. Any other questions that you guys had picked up from the chat room, or you wanted to throw in Mark's direction?
There were a few, actually.
It's coming whizzing.
I know, it goes so fast.
I know, yeah. But while you're looking, Robert in the chat room did mention about the Hydrasynth, and he was wondering, Mark, if you'd had a chance to play with one of those and what you thought of it.
I also know Robert. I haven't, no. It's weird. I haven't, the Hydrasynth and the Peak, I have not. And part of it is because of COVID, I haven't been at conventions, and I need to be at conventions, a number of them, to really get to the various synths that are out there. So I haven't played the Hydrasynth, and I've had people tell me that I would love it, and I've had people tell me that I would hate it. But I don't know.
Yeah. Wagyu says in the chat, right, and you guys picked this up on one. Why hasn't Mark made a 20-part series on the wonderful analog synthesizer, the Akai Timberwolf?
I want to, because I have a feeling, because I love that paradigm that the Timberwolf is built on. I think I'd probably enjoy it, and I want to see if it's as bad as everyone thinks. So, and I would probably, to be honest, I like things that sound weird and operate in weird ways and have weird timbral aspects. And people are like, oh, it goes out of tune. And I'm like, wait, you're saying that like it's a bad thing. I mean, I actually need that to happen. If something stays in tune, I feel like something's wrong with it. So, yeah, I may, if I ever come across one, I will definitely buy it and do it, because I want to I want to see.
Okay, well, we're putting it out there now. If you have a Tamblewolf to extended loan to Mark, or want to sell it to him for cheap, because I can't imagine they go for much these days. Let's get this into the hands of Mr. Marc Doty and get a series of Tamblewolf videos, and we'll have the definitive answers to
a massive paraphonic array of
Tamblewolves. But yeah, I mean, it could do wonders. I mean, Akai could. Well, I mean, who knows?
Listen, they slated the 303 when it first came out.
This
I
is
kind of
true.
share this idea.
I know a lot of people have said this is, the Tamblewolf and is going to be the kind of the 303. It's going to come along 20 years of nothing, and then all of a sudden one clever person, Mr. Doty, could just expose it for exactly what it should be used for. But hey, who knows?
It's true about tuning. My MKS80 that we mentioned earlier has a tune button on the front, and I don't know whether the Jupiter 8 or the Jupiter 6 has that button, but it sort of just brings everything back in tune, and the trick is never ever to press it. It sounds all thick and wonderful, and you go, I'll record that now, just let me put it back in tune, and it goes like that, and it just thins out completely.
Yeah,
it's gone.
So
yeah,
Tim, one more question if we can.
Yeah,
Timber
sure.
Roboto asks Mark's take on Eurorack, and I'm kind of interested about that too, because you love the 2600, and that's get the semi-modular. What's your take on Eurorack modular?
I think it's morally wrong, and I think everyone who uses it should be ashamed. Here's the thing with me with Eurorack, and it's really interesting. What I don't think people talk about enough is that Eurorack is a culture. I mean, because on the face of it, it's just modular synthesis like any other modular synthesis. And I started to realize, because people are like, Mark, when are you getting into Eurorack? And I mean, I do have some Radiophonic 1.
Ooh,
anyway,
nice.
The thing about it is, though, that Eurorack isn't a type of instrument. It is a culture of synthesizer usage. People use Eurorack in certain ways that if I were to use Eurorack, I would not use those ways. I wouldn't sequence anything. I would just make a super powerful synthesizer that I would play like I would play any normal synthesizer. And I realized no one wants to see me do that. No one wants to see Marc Doty make Eurorack into, a prog instrument or something. Because I don't do any sequencing. And I started to realize that I was divergent due to my age from the way that Eurorack is most typically used, which has to do with sequencing. And a friend of mine, Wes, sort of taught me that, because when he would talk to me about what he was doing in Eurorack, I'm like, wait, what? Because it was all about like note divisions and sequencing and shift registers, and I'm just like, what? That's not synthesis. What the hell is that? And so I've sort of given people the impression that I am anti-Eurorack, but the truth is, I just don't think anybody wants to see what I would do with Eurorack.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't know. There's some people in the chat saying they would. So,
well, okay. Let me tell you what I would do. I would buy as many inexpensive sine wave oscillators that I could possibly find, and then I would just do an additive synthesizer with it. A bunch of sine waves and envelopes and amps, and I'd buy as many as I could to have as many harmonics or partials as I could, and I'd do additive. That's what I would do.
Buy DX7.
Yeah. Also, to point out, the Radiophonic 1 is from Suit and Tie Guy, who we had on the show a couple of months ago, and was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And
that unit that you showed there is kind of like, it's like a synthesizer made out of bits of Eurorack, but it's a functioning standalone unit, isn't it?
Yes. Suit and Tie Guy is a good friend of mine. So.
Yes, good lad. Adamski in the we're going to have to get Adam on to our show at some point. So he wants to know, what are your thoughts on most modern analog synths having a smaller footprint form factor, as he's developing a synth which is, in a word, monophonic and huge?
I think, again, this is a cultural difference. Like, I want to stand in front of a giant console. I mean, I want the instrument that I play to be this substantial thing, but it's the trends have really moved towards like, and you can see this, I see it every day, people saying, you know, oh, why couldn't this be smaller? I wish this was smaller. I need it to fit on my desktop. I need it to fit into my rig, you know, and I like big synths. I think big synths are fun because of the physical interaction element. I think a lot of people, I don't know if this is true, this might be a massive sweeping generalization, but I think a lot of younger people don't interact with their synths as much as they use their synths as production tools for the track that they're making. If that distinction makes sense. I want to physically like be touching and playing and expressing through my instrument. I'm less about like, okay, this is where I, you know, turn the filter cutoff knob. That's kind of not my thing. But something that's bigger allows me to have knob space, you know, where I have the physical experience of playing them. So I say building a huge monophonic would be really cool. Trying to think, I've had a huge monophonic. What was that? I don't know, like the Compuphonic, what Roland was that? The ProMars is a huge monophonic.
Yeah. Is it the Matrix Brute? Like that's kind of big, isn't it, for a monophonic?
Oh, it's almost as big as my head.
Yeah. But it is. I mean, it's a. I remember seeing that and then thinking, wow, that's all this for one note at a time. But then
proper bit of furniture, and you can fold the back down and up. You know, that was full marks to them for making that, actually, because they could have put that all in a very slim little lightweight case. It feels like
I was a little disappointed when I saw the Polybrute didn't have the same tilting.
Me too.
Yeah, really. Oh, that's glad I'm not alone on that one. But because you mentioned about fitting things on. I'm just trying to figure out where I'm going to put the damn thing when it comes, because it's quite a deep synth, isn't it? You know, from front to back. So
that's why it's sticking out into the studio, because I'm like, and you can't put it under. Like you can. I want to have it in my Matrix Brute, like in some sort of combination. But there's you can't put one over or under the other without obscuring something. So I kind of have them at this right angle. Yeah. Because they, you know, I don't know. It's. I guess it's the price you pay for big giant synths.
Yes, quite. Yeah, indeed. Should we just do the last couple of news topics? Or sorry, did you have something else, Chris?
No, that's right. Go ahead.
Yeah,
let's do it.
Yeah, so I want to put this out there. First of all, Mark, thank you. Thanks for all of that. We're not going yet, but thank you for indulging us and the chat room in picking your brains. And we might just cut that paraphonic segment out and post that as a standalone video, because it was so well articulated. So
and turn comments off, because
it's well articulated.
Oh. I didn't even know it. Look at that. I'm genius. So yeah, let's do a couple of these last news things. I want to get this one out there because Chris and I have been very fortunate to be trying these out. This is a new sound set from James Dyson, who I think is still in the chat room. James has been doing some amazing sound sets for the likes of Modal. What else? He's been doing some other stuff, Chris, and the other synths. Can't remember off the top of my head. I should have done some proper research. But this one was kind of close to my heart because it's using the new FM algorithms that Modal Electronics put into the Cobalt 8. It's 50 custom presets for £10, or whatever that works out in your currency. And there's some really, really good tones in here. Really, really nice tones. All you've got to do is go and watch this video. And if you scroll down, you'll see James has put an email address in there. And you just drop him an email and he'll sort you out with the PayPal address. £10, and he'll send you that within 12 hours. It's a really, really great collection. I've been going through that quite a bit, as you can hear. What did you think of these, Chris?
Yeah, it's great, and the price on them is fantastic for £10. So yeah, definitely go check those out if you got a Cobalt, and I think it's some of the other synths that he's working on as well. So
yeah, I've got his Cityscapes was the last one, I think. That was really nice. I really enjoyed
for
that
the
one.
Argon.
Yeah, and there's
Or,
there's
sorry,
a whole
the
bunch.
Cobalt, I mean,
Yeah, the
Cobalt.
Cobalt. Yeah, but he's
Yeah.
done some Argonate stuff. I think might have done some other modal stuff. But there was some. Oh, what was he doing the other day? He was doing JD800 stuff as well recently. I think he's just got one of those. So yeah, James Dyson, he's in the chat room. Go and find that video, James Dyson channel on YouTube, and the links all in there. You can avail yourself of one of those for very little money. Indeed, and last week, because I'm going to try and drag this back into the digital realm as much as I can. Just realised we're just watching Cryss there. The other thing is, you remember last week we had Jim Daneker on the show, and Jim had this thing called Backstage Pass, which is a tool for MainStage, Apple's MainStage, and because Jim does a whole lot of live work, he's created this environment that sits on top of MainStage and has a Touch OSC controller interface on the iPad as well. And we've been very lucky to have had a chance to play around with DX Dreams. And I know Cryss probably also wants to say as well, how freaking good this is. I mean, I've obviously got a bunch of DX things here, but the immediacy of this and the degree of sampling that he's put into this, along with using the outboard gear of the day to achieve the right kind of, that tone that we all expect from these things, it's just brilliant. I just really, really love it. And that TX816 interface is a joy to look at. But also Touch OSC, my God, I've never really used it before. Dom's grinning there. It was just wow. This is superb. I can control this thing from over there, and it's all nice and intuitive, and it works, and it's really good. What do you think about that, Cryss?
Oh yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. And so I've got the Essence FM sitting here, which is my first hardware FM synthesizer, digital FM synthesizer, and so programming on there is fantastic. But when you start thinking about those classic sounds, every time I've tried to find software to do the classics, I've always been disappointed. Dext and Arturia DX7V, it's cool, and I've done a little programming on there. But when you just need to go and add some of the classic sounds to your music, it's a little bit harder to find them. And this was just a pure joy to use.
Yeah.
And I had so much fun going through the presets. There's a lot of the classic stuff, like the Top Gun sounds, which I immediately altered and made into the Taco Bell sound also, because that's what you gotta do. Okay, that said, it really has killed gas for a lot of the old Yamaha stuff, because I don't feel like I as great as that stuff is, like, I don't have room, and I'm not a collector, so having these sounds just accessible on the computer real easily. And it's not just that they're those sounds, because it's the way that he's treated and recorded them. It's all the outboard gear that has been used, and he's done it really well.
Yeah, it's a really cracking thing. If you're looking for immediacy, I mean, a lot of people said, well, you've got all the damned hardware there, why would this interest you? Well, it's the fact that I can just pull it up and get that something real quickly without having to dive in and mess around with the hardware itself, which I will then obviously get back to.
MainStage is a real gem, actually.
Yeah.
A real undiscovered gem. Most people haven't used it, but it's there. It's Apple's very cheap, lightweight Logic's live version, but its whole being is to take just a copy of MainStage on stage and not your hardware. So it has auto sampling in there. When you're ready to go out live, you can just hit a button and it'll pull in all your hardware sounds, map them out across your keyboard, and you can do stuff like this. It's a real gem of a bit of software.
Yeah, I mean, I bought it because it was like £29 pounds or something on the App Store, thinking I'll just get it because it might be useful. And the more I kind of look into it, the more powerful I kind of realise
a lot of my friends use it live. And a lot of looper friends use it live as well, just to be able to quickly flip between presets and stuff. And up until the latest Logic update, it was the only way you could auto sample. So it had this beautiful built-in auto sample. Plug it into my keyboard, it would just wander off and it would sample all the sounds. It's now gone into Logic at the last update, but yeah. It was worth it just for that.
I think that was the main reason
thing.
I bought it, was because of that auto sampling function, just for the ease and speed of use. But I'm surprised that Dr. Synth, our friend Manny Fernandez, hasn't chipped in. He's probably had to go back to work, because he would have probably called me a heretic for using sampled FM synthesizers. But hey,
but
I'd love a demo. Just the only thing that's missing, I'd love a demo, because I was rushing out to download it to have a good take on it before, and I don't think there's a demo. It mentions a demo, but there's No, I meant a downloadable demo.
So you can
right,
like,
sorry, yes.
Just some kind of time limited thing, so I could have a crack.
Yeah,
at it would be
but
really
his like I don't remember how long it is, hour and a half or something, walkthrough of it is really good. And so just right now it's available for main stage in Logic. So actually I've been using it in Logic, and it's great. But he's got more. I think he was talking about Contact and some other formats.
Yeah, he's doing a Contact
future.
version.
So
yeah,
those of you who don't use Logic, it'll be coming in the future, and it's really, really highly recommended from us.
Yeah, definitely. So
that's from Robbie, who has that impressive backdrop of DX synthesizers. I mean, it's one thing for me to say it, but for Robbie, there you go.
Yeah, and that's probably going to get bigger soon. More news on that later. Backstagepass.store is the website. We spoke to Jim last week. If you want to go and rewatch that show, he was a fascinating guy and a really great product. Have you got any DX or digital stuff in your collection there, Mark? Go on, say you have, please.
I had no, I don't. I used to have a DX100, and I had the Volca FM. Okay. But I don't have either of those anymore. So
I think you'd like the Essence, don't you, Cryss?
Yeah, it's a fantastic synthesizer. I'm really impressed with it.
Yeah, very good. Right, let's do this one last thing here, because this again was a last-minute addition to the list of news items. It's not massive, but it's useful, actually. This is the news that Roland Cloud have added Zenology effects to the Roland Cloud
part of the genre-defining Roland sound is our unique approach to effects processing. The swirling Juno chorus, feedback-drenched tape echo, and others have left their mark on countless tracks over the decade. And with Zenology effects, you can now add that flavor to any keyboard sound or instrument track right inside your DAW. Fast, lightweight, and with a modern, streamlined interface, Zenology Effects is powered by our acclaimed ZenCore synthesis system and brings decades of sound research to your creative workflow.
Well, there you go. That's enough of the, so here we have marketing blurb. Let's turn that off and bring us all back into the room. Nice little addition to the Roland Cloud. Obviously, if you're a subscriber, you don't pay any more for this, and you get a really nice selection of effects. However, no reverbs, apparently, in this, which seems like an odd omission from an effects section. But it's all those kind of classic Roland pieces of hardware, the Juno 60, the tape echo stuff, and those nice kind of clean, sterile interfaces. I was a little disappointed that they weren't, the full shebang.
I love the interfaces. I think.
Do you like those? Do you?
I like a clean, functional interface. I like the fact that they've made a kind of central holder into which you load each of the effects, but they all look basically the same. It's very incineratory, kind of standard, flat. And I went through it really quickly just before we came. I was going to say, before we kind of dissed Roland Cloud a bit at the beginning, it downloaded perfectly.
Yes.
It didn't ask me for my login again. I mean, recently, Cloud has been kind of worth it. It's been a good thing. So it was a real no-brainer. Download exactly till tomorrow morning, and it worked. And the first thing I checked out was the Juno 106 chorus, and it does sound like the Juno 106 chorus, and it has a noise knob, so you can literally turn the noise knob all the way up to the top, and it goes.
Yeah.
Or you can turn it off completely, and it sounds strangely wrong with no noise. Actually, weirdly, but it's a decent thing. I tried out the tape echo, and it sounds like a tape echo, but it didn't feedback on itself. So the feedback doesn't take it into constant repeating. So I fed it back on itself by sticking it on a channel, and it sounded horrible, which is a real shame. In the way that the pedal, what is it? Is it the 3? remember what it is. It's the Roland chorus pedal that mimics their space delay. If you feed that back on itself, it does actually sound like a degrading thing. This one didn't. So I would expect probably an update to that coming soon.
So yeah, I say, who are they speaking to? What are their QA guys doing when somebody like yourself can, like, within 5 minutes of downloading it, discover that it's not doing something that the original did, and yet all their advertising.
It's not even doing what you'd expect a delay to do, to be honest. It's ringing off into kind of this high belly-like terribleness, unfortunately, and that's the reason why they obviously didn't allow the feedback knob on the thing itself to get a little bit ropey. So I don't know. Yeah, it's nice. It's nice though. Those are the two things I'd want. Oh, and the Dimension D is in there.
Yes, that
sounded
that was
okay. I've kind of forgotten what that sounded like, but it sounded nice. Nice thing for free.
To be honest, it's nice that they've actually released this and not yet another damn sample pack. Because I don't. Am I the only one that's getting sick to death of like every week? Oh, here's another 4 sample packs of things I'll never use.
You know, if they were doing it at the level that Jim is doing it, then I would be happy about it. But they're not. They're not even getting close.
No. It's so it's nice to see that. But I was kind of hoping for a new synth at some point fairly soon, because what was the last thing they added synth-wise?
Well, they did the Juno 60, but that's kind of like low-hanging fruit because they got a lot of that already done. So
Jupiter 4.
I think, you know, the effects would have been more exciting in the legendary versions where it's a little more accurate, and I would have liked to have seen their CE1 chorus. I don't know if you guys have ever had one of those. They're just huge chorus pedals, but they sound amazing. They're so simple, just one LFO, nothing fancy about them at all, but they just have that wonderful sound to them, and I'm always looking for that because I miss the couple that I've had. But I would love to have it in the box. But this doesn't really seem to be that. It seems to be their very generic take on effects. And like you said, if the Space Echo is not feeding back, that's like one of the key features of the Space Echoes. Those bandpass delays that get narrower and narrow as they go on.
Exactly. They call it tape delay in it. But yeah, it would be. It's quite difficult to make a delay do exactly what that did. It's not musical or useful in any way whatsoever, but it's quite hard if someone says, can you make a delay do this with an algorithm? So it's something weird. So, and I totally agree. If they just released one Space Echo, could have flat knobs on it, could have the designs or whatever, but oh man, I'd kill for that.
Get it, do it right.
Really audio thing, Outer Space, really does the Space Echo well. Better than any of the other ones. I've got a few other Space Echo plugins, but that thing really sounds like a Space Echo.
Yeah. And with that, Mark's DX7 that he has programmed meticulously throughout the show tells us that we have gone way over time, but it just hasn't felt like it at all. So I apologise for keeping you and everyone here, but thank you. Mark, mate, long time no see. I miss your face. I miss spending lots of time talking with you, and we need to get together soon. So as soon as we can, let's do that. But thank you for coming on. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me, and I'm sorry it's taken me so long to find like a weekday that I could actually do it, but I really appreciate it, and what you guys have going on is really fantastic. So
thank you. No, it's great, and it was worth all the effort, and we appreciate you taking the time out. I hope that you enjoy the rest of the time with your son. I hope you have some fun and don't feel too tired. Get some rest, old man. Get some rest.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, guys, anything planned?
Can I wave a wiggly flag, please?
Yes, go for it. Please do, because you've got somebody on your show on Sunday, haven't you?
Kent Spong's coming on. Kent Spong's coming on. So, Sunday, and he asked to come on, which is absolutely brilliant. I mean, these guys on ProSynth, he's now going to become a semi-regular pundit on here, which is amazing. Yeah. And he has been on here recently, but he's the best guy. He's just such an entertaining man. And he basically, he said, I only want to come and do Lula May's quiz. Yeah. So he's going to come on Sunday. If you're not aware, I do this 7 o'clock UK time on a Sunday stream. and it's not synth news particularly. It's just talk about music and synths with someone. And this week it's going to be Kent, so it's going to be really, really good. Couple of surprises coming up. We'll do this stupid, crazy quiz that my 9-year-old daughter does, with questions like, "What's the name of my elephant?" and "What did I do yesterday?"
The one that I really loved, was it last week? Who is this an impression of?
Oh yeah.
Me. It was great.
And no one got it.
No one got it.
was
Well
amazing.
done.
And she
Absolutely.
milked it. She was like,
Yeah.
me.
Brilliant.
So yeah, he's coming on, which is going to be great. So we might even overrun a bit on that one as well.
Oh, I hope you
Kent,
do.
If you're not aware of Kent, he's just, well, he basically fixes and repairs synths for the entire world of megastars and everything. But he's just got so many good stories and such an entertainingly nice guy. So this is going to be a fun one, I think. So join me on YouTube. Just search Mr. Wiggly on YouTube on Sunday. And so yeah, Mr. Wiggly, MR Wiggly on YouTube, or mrwiggly.co.uk. There's links there as well. And join up. It's really, really cool. So
Yeah. And of course, the Incinerator plugin, which is an awesome plugin. If you haven't got it, get it.
mrwiggly.co.uk, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, go and grab a plugin. It's only 20 quid, and it makes
It'll
your
feed
synths
audio
sound good.
directly into Dominic's house and process it for you and send it right back. Which is brilliant, yeah. Chris, what's going on in your immediate future? Anything fun?
Sunday night, 7 p.m. UK time.
Yeah.
Seriously, like last Sunday, I was out with I get pretty severe headaches, and I mean darkened room and all of that, thrown up, and I put Mr. Wiggly on and I listened to it. I wasn't in the chat because I didn't really want to look at a screen and type, but that's how good it is. Like, even if you're feeling like crap, you still gotta go and watch it. So more synth programming. I've been working on the Summit, and we were talking about how good digital oscillators have come, and the Summit of course is like a hybrid synthesizer with digital FPGA oscillators and analog filter, VCA, and all that kind of stuff. And it's really, I'm surprised. When I first played, I was like, maybe not. But then I spent some time really digging into it and programming it, finding out that you can make some really great sounds with it. So be working on that. And with all this, fun new software and stuff that I've gotten this week, hopefully I'll have a time to revisit some of those things like the Korg Collection and play a little more of James Dyson's patches on the Cobalt.
Yeah.
And again, just want to say thanks to Mark, because it's been such a great time and such an interesting show, and the conversation we've had with you. And I hope that one day that our paths will cross at NAMM or KnobCon or something, and that as I walk up the stairs, you will run away from me.
So
boots.
I had the thought that maybe Prince was just like, oh no, he's going to talk about the paraphonic stuff again. Let's go. Great. I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm going to be playing with my plugins a lot. I was hoping to be learning the Polybrute, but as of just recently, it's still sat in a customs clearance building, and it's not coming anywhere near here soon, unfortunately. But yes, hopefully be getting to play with that, and I should be watching, of course, your extensive range of videos, Mark, and probably pinging you some emails to ask you questions when I get stuck.
Oh, cool.
Thank you, Mark, again for coming on. It's always great to see you. Please come on again soon,
sure.
as and when you can. Chris, thank you, and Dom, of course, thank you for standing in for Ben. All right. I'm hoping that he didn't pop up at all tonight, so I'm hoping that he's having a great gig, like one of the first ones back after the pandemic. So we'll learn all about that next week. Very quickly, next week, who have we got on next week? Let me just remind myself. Okay. Oh yes, we've got to tell people about this, haven't we? So next week we have got David Bessel, 1/4 of supergroup Node. He's going to be coming on August 6th, and then August 13th we've got Mark Reeder. Here's a picture of Mark looking suitably spectacular in his military get-up. Mark Reeder, DJ, promoter, label manager, artist in his own right, has done huge amounts of remix work for the likes of Pet Shop Boys and Depeche Mode. He's going to be coming on the show August 13th. Then August the 20th is the first of sorry, Dom. It's the first of Kent Spong guest appearances. It's going to be a monthly thing. If you have any questions for Kent in terms of synth restoration, synth repair, save them up, and we'll be pooling those very shortly. And then, what have we got? Scroll down the list. We've got Mel Wesson, who works with Hans Zimmer and is also part of Node. He's going to be coming on at the end of August. Fingers crossed on that. We're just waiting for confirmation because of various things that he's got going on. We mentioned last week, September 3rd, we've got David Arnold, the composer, James Bond movies, Sherlock Holmes,
Stargate.
Stargate. Yeah, just loads of stuff that he's done. So David Arnold's coming on. We've got to thank Kent for lining that one up. Mick McNeil from Simple Minds, September 10th, then Kent again. And we've got 2 brand new ones that we're going to tell you about. First of all, September 24th, we have got the living legend, the man behind the Human League, Heaven 17, the British Electric Foundation, and much more. We have Martin Ware on the show September 24th. Martin, of course, has his own weekly podcast series called Electronically Yours at the moment, and is either tonight or tomorrow getting Heaven 17 back in front of an audience after obviously a long while off, so he's looking forward to that. So September 24th, Martin Ware on this show. In October, we're going to be joined by Ken Flux Pierce again on October 1st. He's going to come back and he's going to be all ASM'd and going to tell us about that kind of world. Are you sitting down? Because on October the 8th, I'm so excited about this one. I'm just going to put the picture up there.
Robbie,
okay, yeah.
I've got a new nickname for you.
Okay.
I'm going to have to call you Mr. Rolodex now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because you know everybody.
My little black book. Okay, this next guest, who's coming up on October 8th, I've been trying to get him for a little while. He is a huge hero of mine. He has been responsible for some of the greatest pop songs of our generation, of any generation. We've got this guy coming on.
Wow.
Steve Porcaro of Toto, the man responsible for playing on sessions from Thriller, of course in Toto, Rosanna, Human Nature. I mean, gosh, what hasn't this man done? Steve Porcaro will be our very special guest on October the 8th. I'm getting nervous just thinking about that show. Of course, we'll have Kent on that month, and Kent will be followed up by Axel Hartman, who's we've had to shift his show slightly, but October 22nd, Axel will be on the show. That's going to be fantastic. So, yeah. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the show, and just please give us as much support, because it's because of your support we're able to go out and get these guys and girls and throw them on the show and let you speak to them, ask them questions, and yeah, it's just fantastic. You're in esteemed company, Mark. You're in esteemed company. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to all the chatties. You guys have been absolutely great throughout the whole show. Thank you for all of your questions, your comments, your support, your donations. Are all greatly appreciated. We'll see you same time, same place next week with David Bessel as our special guest, and hopefully Ben Simpson revived after his gig experience.
Perhaps we could end the show with Dominic donning the binware and calling us all wankers, especially the guitarist.
Come on. Let's do this properly.
Stand by.
And say it with disdain, please.
Bloody drummer was rubbish tonight, I tell you. Anyway. Time I had to beat him. Anyway, it's rubbish. You're all rubbish. And I'm just going to go to bed now because there's nothing to really talk about. And this bloody synth thing I've got doesn't even work anymore. So, all right. And I sound like I come from Devon now. I've moved from up north.
It's like he's in the room. It's okay.
You have to shoot further and have to shoot for Liverpool, and then you'll fall a little short right into Warrington.
Gary Barlow. Just channel Gary Barlow, and you're there.
Yeah, all right, kid.
Oh, no.
Oh, Native VS says, "Is that the ZZ Top beard?" And there was, of course, sad news that Dusty Hill has
Terrible,
passed.
terrible. What a band! What a band! What a band!
Absolutely.
Anyway, you're all rubbish.
So now they
and hate you.
will have a replacement.
Yeah. Get in touch with Billy.
Dominic Hawken on bass.
Yeah. Gentlemen, ladies in the chat room as well, thank you all for your company and your patronage. As always, it's a great honour and a great pleasure to do the show with you guys and for you viewers. Mark, again, thank you very much indeed. Sorry to have kept you so long. Chris, thank you as always. Dominic, a special thank you to you for standing in for us once more. Don't forget Mr. Wiggly Show on Sunday with Kent Spong, special guest. We will see you same time, same place for episode 70 with David Bessel. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you all very, very soon. Bye-bye.